sing though, right? You sing?
I do sing.
So you're familiar with vocals and microphones?
Yeah.
A little bit?
A little bit.
Cool. Do you record anything yourself or?
I've never recorded anything because I mostly do like open mics or like small performances like in my dorm or at my house. So I don't plan on releasing anything publicly, at least in the near future.
Well, you're still young.
Yeah, maybe that'll change if I have like a set as amazing as you do and like good equipment. Maybe I'd consider it. But
well, that's good. I could definitely give you some advice on starter stuff, many scales, tiers of financial backgrounds of like what you can get. What's the most you can do with, $300, $500? I do that. I teach as well, and I'm constantly doing that. I teach what I do, so I'm always having to find the right budget for the right student. Some students have a $50 budget. You got to figure that out. Some have $500, and some will, spend as much as they can to make it work. Like that's how I was in college. I'll spend everything.
Yeah, when it's your passion, you make it work.
Yeah, I didn't care at all. I was like, this is so cool to have microphones and record people. Yeah, it was really cool back then. Now it's just a burden. Now I have all these things I have to maintain and fix.
Yeah, but I feel like you utilize it more.
Oh, I use it all the time.
The space inspires you.
Yes, all the time I'm using it.
You have like more of a reason to get out there and make the time to use it.
Yeah, exactly. Go downstairs from where I sleep.
Yeah, and because it's this close. That's
yes. Great. Beautiful to live where you work rather. Sometimes a little risky, sketchy. Not so much for me. I've been doing this a while. I'm very good at vetting people. And it's just different when you're like a grown man. It's just different. I understand why your father drove you, Yeah. I get it.
Yeah. Also just being at home, like, because I go to school in Boston, so I don't have like a car or anything. And when it's 22 degrees out, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go take the bus for an hour and a half. He was like, absolutely not. I'm dropping you off. Like, there's no way you're going to die.
That's all. Well, that's nice of him.
Yeah. I'm also an only child. So he's like, both of my parents are super, they want to make sure I'm okay.
The only child, little girl situation, I've seen that. I'm very close to people like that. It's a different type of protection, I guess you could say. It's intense. And
for sure.
You're like, don't even get me started.
Yeah, even though I'm 20, like my parents, they also immigrated here from Latin America, like in their late 30s.
Which countries?
My mom from Mexico and then my dad from Argentina. And they were both they were in their 30s when they came. So they don't know English. They're working class people. And they just, I think naturally, like when you immigrate that late in life and you don't have the strongest like network where you live, like you're a little distrusting of
course,
your surroundings, especially in a place like Chicago where like you hear on the news like every other weekend there's a horrible...
There is.
There are horrible things.
But there's 3 million people, so it's simple math.
Yeah, statistically it's very unlikely, but...
Yes, it's very unlikely.
Saying that to my parents, absolutely not.
It doesn't work for a young lady to say those like crime stats that tend to happen towards them. It's not going to do anything.
Yeah, no,
and
for sure.
Being foreign doesn't help. I'm very close to those cultures. You just said I'm half Mexican. My grandparents are from Mexico.
Oh, wow.
And then my brother's wife is Argentinian, and her parents are from Argentina. So
both
of it's funny you said that. I'm very close to both of those situations, those cultures. But in a lot of those cultures, they're quite worried and a little bit more strict on women in those cultures.
Oh, for sure.
So that probably translates to if you were a boy, they would be like, you can go do this and that. That's how my parents were to me as well. They let me do way more than my sister. And she was older, and they still were more strict, so I get it.
Yeah.
Harvard is probably what I assumed you go to because you said Boston. Mm-hmm. So it's usually what people say when they go to Boston.
Yeah, that or MIT. I think it's worse. A lot of my friends are like, I go to a small school in Cambridge. And I'm like, it's one of 2 schools. Like, that's even worse. That's even worse.
I go to a small school that is the biggest school in the world. That's
very
cool.
Small liberal arts. No.
That's really cool. So you grew up in Chicago, and you were mentioning before the podcast these art exhibitions, an art space. You weren't too specific. I wanted to say, but couldn't you elaborate? First of all, I guess say who you are. We haven't even done that yet, and what you do, and talk about what you've been working on, please.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Katherrin Billordo. I grew up in Chicago, but my family's from Mexico and Argentina. And I've been making music. I've been painting and drawing literally for as long as I can remember. I wrote my Common App essay about it. It's like one of the first things I tell people when I meet them is I create a lot, whether it's paintings or drawings or photography or playing guitar or playing piano or singing or organizing art galleries. It's what I do. And I love meeting people throughout the process, expressing myself. expressing my culture. And now that I definitely my first 2 years in college, I haven't had the most time in the world to focus on that, but I like declared my major as like art and psychology with a minor in econ. So now through my classes and a lot of my extracurriculars, now I'm shifting a little bit more towards focusing back into art, because I think definitely when you're like a first gen American, first gen college student, I think at least my parents, they've always been super loving and emotionally as supportive as you can be. But when it comes to like focusing your profession, your livelihood, what makes money on just art, I think it's a bit risky. So
It is.
It's definitely risky. And my mom, ever since I was little, she was like, Katherrin, like, we love you. We came to this country to give you a better life, but like, just know there's no safety net. Like, it's just my mom and my dad in the States. We don't have cousins. I don't have siblings. We don't have grandparents here. And my parents don't really have too many friends in the States. So it's like, you gotta make a life for yourself. Yeah. You gotta make a life for yourself and make sure that you can sustain yourself, that you can only rely on yourself. And whatever happens, like, be your best supporter, because one day we'll pass away, or crises happen, and you want to make sure that you're financially and like emotionally supported in a worst case scenario. But that's a very, very gloomy note to start off on. The point is, I love making art.
It's very real,
despite the risk. Yeah,
it's very real, and it's not a joke. Too many Americans, I'm sure other people do in other countries, but too many Americans think that because of where they are, that they'll end up like making it or being wealthy, and these loans don't matter, student loans, credit cards, that they're not that big of a deal. And when you come from a situation like yours, where it's like very real, it's similar to mine, that there is no safety net, there is no backup. You have to full send it in whatever it is you do, and you don't really have a choice any other way. It's people conflate that with like the American dream, or like they should get it, like they're deserving of it, and it's a problem now with society. I'm sure social media has not helped. You're probably better to talk on it than I am because of your age group that you're in, and you have grown up with the smartphone and social media, and I have not, and I'm sure in some ways with what you do, it's actually very helpful. The art, promoting, trying to get people to come to the space that you're working with. You said it's doing a small business of putting on art events?
Yeah, so I consider myself like to have two little things. So I'm like a freelance visual artist, so I'll do like commissions, I'll work with like local brands, local like coffee shops, and exhibit my artwork wherever I can find it. So in libraries, I like will apply to art competitions, just anywhere that I can exhibit my own paintings and photography and drawings, I'll put my art out there, and obviously that's for profit for myself. But then I also do like art galleries, and I started organizing them when I was 16 in Chicago. And then I just had was it last week? Last week I had my first art show in Boston, and that was like,
wow.
I called it the Harvard-Yale Art Show. And as the name would imply, it's with Harvard and Yale students. And it was during the Harvard-Yale weekend, which is like a big football game. It's like the huge rivalry.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Oh, it's insane. Like alumni come, like literally the stadium is like packed. People sell like those tickets for like $80+. It's insane. It's a really good weekend for like collaboration and to organize some sort of event. So the a cappella groups will have a mixer, the dance groups will have a mixer, the cultural groups will have a mixer, but I didn't find that there was like a visual arts mixer, or one that didn't like surround, like whose main purpose wasn't to like sell art or to make a profit. It was just having art for the sake of having art. Mm-hmm. So I had an art show there. But before then, I've had 3 art shows. And the first one that I had was my senior year of high school. It was when school started. So it must have been like August of 2021 was my first art show. And I started planning it like since like spring. So like my junior year, I was like 16 when I was like trying to find the venue, trying to get funding, trying to find some people to help me. And I'm sure because you're familiar with the art scene in Chicago, you've probably heard of like Any Squared projects. Yeah. And After School Matters. Have you heard of that nonprofit? Mm-hmm. So I was involved with After School Matters. I think it was during COVID. So like the summer after my sophomore year of high school, I started doing like, at the time it was like virtual art classes with them. And there was one instructor, her name was Miriam, and she was like so kind. She was always helping people, sending people like scholarships and art competitions and just a bunch of opportunities, because a lot of us, like I would say the vast majority of us were like either low income or first gen students or like Hispanic, Black students. And so she really wanted to make sure we were like fully supported in any capacity. And so when I started like sharing with her like, oh, I really want to make an art show, she told me, she was like, oh, apply to this national grant. Go and talk to other After School Matters teachers. And like through word of mouth was how I ultimately got the gallery to start running. So, so fast forward to my junior spring, I started asking other like After School Matters teachers. I was like, oh, how do I get a venue? What goes into organizing a show? How do I get people to care? How do I get musicians? How do I get food vendors? And they started referring me to other people and friend of a friend of a friend. And I ended up going to Any Squared. I met Tracy, who is like, she's like the founder of Any Squared. It's like her space where she does the art studios, and she does a bunch of art events. And I went to her and I was like 16, 17 at the time. And I was like, oh, how do I do this? Like, how do I even get started? Where do I get the venue? Because at the time I had funds. I got like a $300 like national grant. Like not a lot to work with if you're doing like a pretty big art show. It's not a lot at all.
No.
But I was like, I have $300 and like I went to Northside College Prep, which is a really good high school. And we had a pretty strong art department in my opinion. And I was like, this is where I'm coming from. What do you suggest that I do? And she referred me to Hairpin Art Center in Logan Square. And it's like a beautiful space. It's like a really vast space where they have like art shows and open mics and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I went to her and I was like, hey, I know I'm 17, 16, whatever I was at the time. I have $300. Like, can we make this work? And she was like, this is ridiculous, but yeah, let's do it. Like, I want to make it happen. Like, it's way below what we would normally like charge, but like, you know what, we'll make it happen. Like, this sounds like a really cool project. And that was after like countless no's. Like I went to is it Peer Space, or there's like some online website where you can find like venues and stuff. I maybe went to like three or four like art venue locations, and I went there and I was like, this is my budget, can we make it work? And all of them said no. So I was really happy when this one lady who I didn't even know like believed in me and said we can make it happen.
But that only happened because you were persistent and you kept doing it. Because if you gave up after the first one or the second one, you wouldn't have got to that. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, good for her. Kudos to the people that do that see some promise in someone who might not have enough money. That's great too. But it also only happened because you just kept doing it. It sounds like. Where did this idea come from? This motivation and the concept at such a young age. It's not too common. Yeah. You know?
I think I was just applying to a bunch of art competitions, and a lot of my friends were either like musicians or would do open mics or just were in the performing or musical arts. And I was like, in my mind, at 16 years old, I was like, it makes no sense that all these like creative people, like musicians, actors, I don't know,
just
other
interdisciplinary
like
artists.
Yeah, people who are creators, like they have a stage or they have a platform for them to perform. But I'm like, for the visual arts, there's not much, at least for young artists. Like there's no big like center or gallery where the main purpose is just to like exhibit artwork for the sole sake of exhibiting artwork. I didn't really find that. Except for After School Matters, where at the very end of the semester we would have like, we would just open up the space and people would go, parents would come, family members would come, and they would just see everything that we've been working on for the past like semester. Mm-hmm. And I was like, it's a shame that it only happens like once or twice a year. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know of any other like dedicated nonprofit or space whose sole purpose was to like just exhibit young artwork. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh, it can't be that hard, right? Like I was very naive and I was like, it can't be that hard. You just got like money and a space and people come and that's how you do it. And then once I started, I was like, wow, it's way more than that. It's marketing, it's budgeting, it's getting musicians, it's coordinating schedules, it's a lot of work. But at the end of the day, it's worth it because I really think that creatives, like half the work is doing what you love. It's making the music, it's recording, it's practicing the dance moves or whatever. Then the other half is like showing it to an audience and receiving feedback and meeting new people. And I think especially for the visual arts, for people who are trying to make some sort of living off of it, you can't just like make artwork in your room and expect it to blow up online or for someone to discover you. That's not going to happen.
It's never going to happen.
You have to put yourself out there. And I think I hope that my galleries are an opportunity. Even if you don't want to be like a full-time professional visual artist who makes money, I hope it's just an opportunity for you to showcase your work and meet other people and put yourself out there. I think that's a good habit to have.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And you came up with this concept around 16. Do you have, is your family in the arts? Like, how did you get started with it? Just naturally just kind of went towards creativity, trying new things, seeing something manifest? Things like that. Yeah,
my parents definitely were not into the arts at all. The most that they did, like they both did dance, like folklore dance, like in Mexico and Argentina. My dad liked to draw when he was very, very young. He's like shown me his drawings. Like he was very, very good at drawing like hyper realistic, like portraits and landscapes. But he never took like they didn't have enough money to take like professional classes or my dad didn't finish college. Neither of my parents finished college, so they didn't have a chance to like pursue their craft like professionally at all. And then in the States, like my dad cooked and my mom was a house cleaner. She was a waitress, so definitely not too many opportunities to be creative at all. But I think definitely, I'm trying to think when it all started. I don't know. I think kids just naturally like draw. They have like coloring books. They make music. They like to sing. They like to dance around. And I think just my parents tried their best to encourage it. Definitely not with private classes, but at least like they would buy me the materials. They
Right.
would
Find clever ways around it.
Yeah.
There's
and they
many
would encourage
tiers.
me. Exactly.
That's
the best
giving
thing
you
could do.
space, encouragement.
Yeah.
Is all you can do. You don't need money for that. A lot of, I wanted to ask you with what you said, coming from that immigrant parents, the types of jobs they had, I'm familiar with that. That's, the type of work my parents did. Unskilled labor. You don't get paid a lot. You're not in a union. You don't have 401k plans. All that is non-existent.
Yeah.
But living that way, growing up that way, I'm assuming a very modest lifestyle in Chicago. And then you mentioned a school that sounded private or something you had to test into.
Northside, it's a public school, but it's like I guess some people call it like a magnet school.
Yeah.
Like you have to test into
You have to test. I
sure.
figured based on how you even said it.
Yeah.
That's what it was. I also know that school's probably not in Logan Square.
Yeah, it's on the north side of Chicago. It was like a 30-minute drive.
Yeah, wouldn't like North Shore suburbs or
It's still, I think it's like Rogers Park
Rogers
area.
Park, okay.
Yeah, like close to like a 15-minute drive from Evanston, like Northwestern's
Right.
campus.
Got
So
it.
It's pretty close.
got it by Loyola and stuff. Okay, so going to there was probably a little bit different from what you were used to. I'm assuming, and then from there to Harvard is even more different. But a lot of people that go to those kind of high schools tend to go to those kind of colleges. What was it like, and what did you learn about the barrier to entry based on ethnicity and race, socioeconomic status, which is probably the most important one, socioeconomic status for all of college.
Yeah.
What did you notice? How just anything about that? Since you're still in it right now, I'm curious what your fresh thoughts on that experience from here to Boston, and everything between being in the arts, being from where you're from, seeing how much little money and investment of these billions of dollars of endowment even go towards art. Just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent set of questions. So I'll start with like my education and my upbringing. So before going to Northside, which is an incredible school, I think obviously if I didn't go to Northside, I wouldn't be at Harvard. Like they really did prepare me for.
What high school would you have been going to? What public school?
I think my neighborhood school would have been Schurz. And Schurz is, I had one of my really good friends, Simona, she goes to Harvard with me. She's in my grade. She was the first person, I think, ever to go to an Ivy League school from Schurz. Schurz is a public school, but, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Schurz. I've never been there myself, but I've Simona and a few other friends who have, and from what I heard, it's just not, I don't think they have too many APs. There's like violence and there's like, I don't know, like.
You're describing inner city schools.
Yeah,
it's just
a
schools.
lot of public
inner city schools.
Exactly, a lot of public
across
high
the board.
schools.
They're rough.
They're rough.
Not
in
fair.
conclusion.
It's difficult. It's dangerous.
Exactly.
It's not conducive for learning or anything.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And the vast majority of the people who go there are Black and Hispanic or first-gen students, and they need a lot of support. Like any set of kids, like they need a lot of support, and it's just not there. So I'm really glad that I got into Northside. But before I went to Northside, I went to Carlos Fuentes Aceto School, like one of those charter Aceto schools in Alvendale Park. And at the time, my parents just put me in there because they had a friend whose daughter was going there. And they were like, okay, sure, let's just put her in there. Now I look back and just out of curiosity, I looked and I Googled it on Niche or whatever the website is to see how well a school prepares their kids. And it's I think it was 13% of the kids who go to Carlos Fuentes are at the literacy rate or at the national reading level, and 8% are at the national math level. So needless to say, I remember that school, the teachers were incredible, the principals were incredible, and the other students were trying their best. But from K through 8th grade, I just did not feel super prepared for high school, nowhere near as prepared. I remember I didn't have too much homework. I didn't have too many exams. And do you know how at the end of the semester, parent-teacher conferences, kids would have to reflect and say, what did I do right? What would I like to change? And I remember I was looking back, and every single time I would put, I want to feel challenged. I don't feel like I'm learning much. Every single time I'd put that. And I remember we'd have to take like the NWEA, like the standardized, I would call it like a baby SAT is like what we had to take.
Yeah.
And I was always like on the 98th, 99th percentile, where a lot of my classmates were way, way, way below the national average. Like I said, like 13% for reading and 8% for math. They were really, really struggling. And I'm sure the teachers, a lot of them I still keep in touch with, and I love them so much. And they really, especially the reading teachers, they really, I think, gave me a passion for like reading and writing and exploring. We would have a writing contest every year called like the Carlos Fuentes, like called like the A through Z writing contest. So Carlos Fuentes was like a Hispanic writer, and he had a book where he would say like things that he believes in from A through Z, and he like would list different words. And so every year we would go down, and if that year was D, we would have to come up with a word that we believed in that starts with a D. And it would be like a school-wide contest. And I remember I would like love to write those, and it would be so, so, so fun. So the point is, like, teachers were trying their best, principals were trying their best. I think it was like 95% Hispanic, like super, super Hispanic. A lot of us were low income, and everyone was trying their best, but the facts were like students were struggling, and I think are still struggling because the school is going to close this year, is the last year.
Oh my goodness.
I think 5 or 4 Acettle schools are closing. So yeah, that district is really like just struggling a lot. So I think it was just me and 2 other girls who went to Northside from a class of like 64. So that was like not too many of us went to Northside, and you had to test in. So I think it was like grades, the NWEA, and then some like standardized testing exam that you would have to do. And then it was out of 900. You would rank, because it's like Peyton, Northside, Lane, I'm trying to think of other, Whitney Young, I think. Like there's 7 select enrollment schools in Chicago. You would rank it and then just like send it off and see what you got into. And Jones was another one. And Northside was my top choice, and I got into Northside. So my parents were super, super happy because it's an amazing school. It's a public school, but like my year, I think 4 of us went to Harvard, 2 of us went to Yale. So for a public school in Chicago, like we're doing pretty well. Peyton is in like downtown Chicago area. It's another select enrollment school. That one also had like 3 or 4 people go to Harvard. A few people go to Yale. So if you go into one of these schools, like you're just well prepared. We had a bunch of APs. I remember we had like an advanced like ceramics class. What do we have? Like ceramics, drawing, and painting, and like an advanced like freshman class called Art Cubed, which is where you would get taught by all 3 of the art teachers, and it was a small class of like 12 kids.
That's the key, is small class sizes, which you only get at really good schools, good
with a
private
lot of resources.
Schools. A lot of resources. When you have 35 kids, it's impossible. You know, I have a friend who's a teacher. I believe it's K through 6th grade, maybe K through 8th in Pilsen, Chicago. 100% students are, Hispanic, mostly Mexican, aside from a lot of the immigrant students. But that's a whole nother issue besides that. But he has like 35 students. He's maxed out on the max capacity they can give each class before they have to like pay you double for like having 2 teachers. And they do that on purpose. They max it right before that, stipulation kicks in. But the way he describes it, it's chaos, it's hell. It's not conducive. There's no learning. It's just babysitting. Wow. He's being bit. He's being stabbed with scissors. Gosh. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. Wow. It's truly abuse. His stories are horrendous. But like, how are you going to call out abuse against a 5-year-old who's from Venezuela who is not literate in any language, can't speak anything but Spanish, but barely, and can't even read it or write it. So what are you going to do? You know? Yeah, you can't do much. But that's a whole nother issue. That's a problem. But the biggest issue is these schools. It's this perpetuating issue. And I was wondering, since you found a way to reach escape velocity and you got out of that problem, looking back on it, and especially with your peers now at a school as Harvard, do you ever look at it and like, how can my peers and I change these problems, since we're the ones who have gotten through it, and now we're at a place where the type of people who go to school at Harvard and graduate from there do very important things, big things. They tend to have important jobs, make a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
And so how come a lot of people who go there and learn about these problems don't come back to fix it, especially when they get the important jobs that move the strings in the hands in government and in the private sector and in not-for-profit? So, like, I don't know. It's a broad question. It's just what you think about that. Like, a lot of people come out of that and they don't go back to fix it. To figure out, because if you learn so much about the system, you said something about you studying economics?
Yeah, economics is my minor.
Right. Yeah. You learn a lot about, especially at a school like that, the economics. to learn all about that and then to not try to reverse engineer it and go back and fix this system. Just to go back when you graduate to go to another Ivy League for graduate school, an MBA, and just keep perpetuating the issue.
Yeah. I don't know, to get at the broader question of like economic inequality and like public education in the States, like I came from, like I said, a K through 8 school that was public. That was my neighborhood school that is closing down now because the kids were underperforming.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, you touched on teachers are trying their best. Like they're really doing the best with the limited resources that they have. But I think what my mom would always tell me is like, there's a lot of players in the game, right? It's not just the kids who like are children, are minors. Their frontal lobes aren't even developed. Like you can't really blame the kids. They're trying their best. The teachers aren't getting paid like the wages that they should be paying. A lot of my teachers would pay out of pocket for crayons and supplies, which is ridiculous because they're already not getting paid enough. But it's also the parents, which I went to a school that was vastly Latino, vastly low income. When your parents, like mine, my dad would work the night shift. My mom was a waitress that would work like 12-hour days sometimes. Like you just get home and you're exhausted, right? You don't really have the time to sit down with your kid and help them like read at night or practice homework with them or even talk in English. My parents don't speak English. So I remember I was learning English when I was like 5. And like luckily, like my mom, she knew she didn't know English that well, but she would take me to a public library. We would pick out like 10 books at a time, and she would set a little timer every day, 30 minutes, and I would read by myself. Even if she was like washing the dishes, cooking, whatever, I would sit down on the kitchen table and like read next to her. And I think just having that like parental support, even if they don't exactly know what they're doing, like my parents don't know English, they didn't finish college, I think just having the attention and the love and the support in whatever way that can be from a parent really goes a long way. But obviously that's a privilege. Education is a privilege. Having parents who can look out for you and can consider your education is a huge privilege because that requires time, that requires resources. And I understand that parents are trying their best, teachers are trying their best, but not everybody has the privilege of getting a good education or even having the time to support their kid in getting one, which costs a lot of money. And that's a whole different problem. But the point is, like, going from that to a select enrollment school in high school, which is still public, but it was a really excellent school. I took a lot of APs. I think that helped me a lot, but also like Chicago nonprofits. I always say I probably wouldn't have gotten into Harvard if I grew up in like a rural city or something like that, because Chicago has amazing public libraries. It has amazing nonprofits like After School Matters, Marwin. I'm trying to think of other ones that I did, but those are the two big ones where I didn't have access to private art classes, but I could still get amazing public art classes from these nonprofits. And I got art supplies during COVID. They would literally send it to my house, and I had access to the internet and YouTube. And that really helped me in learning things that I couldn't do in school. So I think that all helped me. Like when I was applying to college, I was also involved with a nonprofit called Thrive Scholars. And I think there's another program in Chicago called Chicago Scholars, where basically they help like low-income or Hispanic students like just apply to college, get informed about writing your essays and structuring your extracurriculars and things like that. Because the point is to get to a place like Harvard or any other amazing private or public school, it's not a coincidence that a lot of them are like at the very top of the 1% or went to private schools. It's not a coincidence. It's that with these communities that have a lot of resources or social capital or access to information, you know how to get in. You have to look at it from like a strategic perspective almost. Like I saw a stat that was like the vast majority of people who get above like a 1,300 SAT score, like the vast majority of them are coming from like the top 20% of the income bracket. Like SAT scores are heavily correlated with your parents' income. And why is that? Is it just because higher income people are smarter? No, it's because they have better access to private tutoring, to testing books, which cost a lot of money. And those are kind of things that you have to either get informed through your school or get informed through like your siblings or your parents. You have to be supported by a community. Luckily, like I said, I had help from nonprofits. I had help from the internet. And that's how I kind of like skirted my way around it despite like not having the most support at home. But I think another big question that you brought up was, so these people at Harvard or Yale or any of these incredible institutions that might come from similar backgrounds like me, why do they not give back or support or help these communities? I think a lot of my friends, they either had a nonprofit in high school or they organized things or they did a lot of community work, and then they get to places like Harvard and Yale where the biggest, most popular major is economics for a lot of these schools or business management or whatever. And you kind of get funneled into this like private sector yeah, you kind of just get funneled into the
Goldman
private.
Sachs.
Yeah, Goldman Sachs, McKinsey,
Yeah.
Bain, BCG, all these major like
Yeah.
consulting and financial firms where maybe you started off and you really wanted to do environmental science, or you wanted to go into academia, or you wanted to be an artist. But then you realize, if I major in economics and I intern at Goldman Sachs or McKinsey, I can come out of college and earn like $130K a year at age 21. That is insane.
It is insane.
That is insane, and that's
really
a really
crazy.
big incentive. So I think a lot of people, and I don't know the stats and I don't want to generalize, but I think a lot of people, certainly a lot of people that I know, maybe started off at a place like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, thinking that I'm going to get my degree in government and education, and then I'm going to go back and serve my communities. But when you have this really strong financial incentive, and when you don't have support at home, but you have like maybe a possibility of earning 130K or 120K right out of college and being able to support your family or support yourself or pay off the house that your parents always wanted or the vacation they always wanted, I think that really pulls a lot of people.
But what percentage of Harvard students need to go back home and help their parents?
Yeah,
Yeah.
not a lot of them. I think at Harvard, only 10% of Harvard gets a full ride at Harvard, which I think it's if you earn less than 90K, you get a full ride at Harvard. That's 10% of Harvard.
Okay. You or like the family household?
Your family house.
Right.
Oh, actually, they do consider the student's income. So everyone, your parents and yourself. And I'm sure you've heard of like the FAFSA or the CSS profile. Super, super, I don't want to say invasive. They just ask a lot of questions about you, like what car do you drive? Do you get like gifts, like birthday and holiday money from your grandparents? Like they ask so many questions about your income to determine how much you're able to pay. But yeah, that's the vast majority of places like Harvard and Yale and Princeton.
Yeah, I mean, I a lot of these questions are not, they're almost rhetorical. I'm asking more for the listeners. I kind of know the answers already. I've been around the block a couple times. But the funny thing is, those are some of the best schools in the world to learn about all the problems of the world. And the irony of knowing, like, I can get out of here and make 130 grand, 150 grand at Google, whatever it is. Yeah. Knowing that now you're doing what you just learned about. You just learned about Marx. You went through economics. You learned about all this stuff. And then you're going to go and do it anyway when you just learned about the trap of that or the lobbyists in D.C. that come from these Ivy League schools. You just learned about it. It's so fresh. And then you go back and you don't go backwards. You go forward and you do it anyway. It's kind of interesting how that works. The people who actually learn so much about what is really going on and what has happened and what will happen are at these prestigious places. And so many of them just keep going forward into the system they just learned about through and through. It got flipped on its head and they know so much. Yeah, and it's just, it's aggravating because I'm a part of that world. I'm part of those peers. I went to the Art Institute. I went to grad school. I teach at universities. But I bet you I don't really teach much like other professors. And my experience at that school was brutal and like nothing else. And I did not fit in. And I was going against the grain the whole time. And it did not go smoothly. It was pretty rough. Everyone at that school is very, very, very wealthy at the Art Institute of Chicago. You know,
Wow.
It's like the Harvard of the art schools, you know, that and RISD. And,
and Parsons.
There's a few that are like of the Ivy League of art schools, especially for MFA programs.
Yeah.
And it was eye-opening. But it made me frustrated how much we learn about the problems and then we just keep going forward and we don't step outside that pathway, that through line just to look at the situation. I'm like, okay, if enough of my peers have these education, we can actually like go into our respected fields and like talk about these problems and like make change because now we have the fancy degree and we have fancy positions. We have nice titles. We actually matter. We
More
have power.
authority.
More authority.
Sure.
People listen to me. People respond to my emails now that I could put a professor position after it, whatever it is, things like that. But I mean, you're 20, you can't change the world. But I'm just curious because when you're within it, I don't get to talk to many people that are in it. I know a lot of people who went to those schools, but now I know them in their 30s. It's nice to talk to someone who's living it in this moment. Just curious what they feel or think about it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of my peers too. It's not like that. It's not their end goal to finish at Goldman Sachs. A lot of us use them as a springboard, as like, my parents are getting older, like they don't have a retirement account. Maybe I'll go and work in consulting or finance or whatever. Also, a lot of these firms will pay for your MBA or your MFA or whatever post-grad degree you want. And so they know this, like the firms know this as well. It's not like a well-kept secret or anything. Like a lot of students use this as a springboard, and then once they're like financially secure, they'll go back and they'll help out the communities. But it is like the vast minority of the students who will go back and help. But I think I don't know. I thought about this a lot as well, but I think I don't know. You don't know until you're in that position about like the pressure from your parents. And you should have seen the look on my mom's face when I was like, yeah, I want to major in art, and she was like, what are you doing?
It's funny you said that when you
That's
said
insane.
art, psychology, and a minor in economics. It's a very odd trio.
Yeah.
It is. I didn't say it at first, but I'm glad we're bringing it back up. And yeah, very odd, and that's a lot of work. So double major?
Yeah,
So
double major and a minor.
No wonder why you're so busy
Yeah, it's
at that school. That's not easy to do 2.5, majors about,
yeah. I think I also swapped around a lot. Like I thought, like I declared like social studies because you're supposed to declare like by the end of your sophomore fall, you declare. And I first declared social studies. And then when I was applying to internships, I was like, I'm not getting any return offers. Maybe it's because my major kind of sounds like a middle school class. And then a lot of my peers were saying the same thing. They're like, yeah, maybe switch this to something else. And I think a little bit when I tell people because at Harvard, like social studies is respected. It's like a really intensive like major where you're reading like hundreds and hundreds of pages a week. You have to write a thesis about some like in-depth topic of whatever interest you have, and it's respected at Harvard. But anywhere else, like you kind of hear that, and even my friends at other like really competitive institutions, they're like, "Are you like you have an arts and crafts class, or you have a jump roping class? Like, what do you mean social studies? It sounds like a middle school class."
Yeah.
And I love social studies. In another world, I would have majored in social studies. Where at Harvard, it's like a little bit of government, economics, sociology, and history, and you get to kind of create your own major. But can you really explain that on a resume or to your employer? Absolutely not. So psychology, economics, art, people have a better idea of what that looks like. And I think when I was thinking about what major I wanted to declare, I thought like I don't think about like I don't think about what I want to study. I think about what is the root of my interests. Like why do I tend to seek out like history and government and social studies? Like what about all of those topics? Like what's the common denominator here? And for me, it was like figure out why humans are irrational, what drives like their strange behavior, our judgments, our biases. Why do we shop the way that we shop? Why do we say the things that we say? And I thought the easiest way that question would be answered was through psychology. So that is where I got the psychology part. And then economics, just in case I need a safety net. I also like economics. I don't mind economics. And in case I want to get an MBA in the future, economics is there to support that.
Yeah, you could definitely do that. You seem like someone that would go to grad school.
I definitely want to.
Yeah?
Yeah, either MBA or I think MBA is the most likely one, and then maybe an MFA.
Yeah.
If money weren't an issue.
I have an MFA, and very few people have one. Very few people have them in sound, like me, one of few on the planet. And I always tell people when they want to do an MFA, which this doesn't seem like your situation because you have all these other prospects and avenues you want to go down. But I say you have to be really wealthy, which is the obvious one for like any graduate degree, especially useless ones like MFAs.
It's not useless.
It's not useless unless you are a very useful individual. I found a way to make it useful, but I don't know anybody else who has yet. Very few people have. A few other colleagues that have them, but I don't know anyone who isn't teaching that has done something useful with it. So either a lot of money, amazing connections in that field, that industry, like undeniable ones, like your aunt or your mom. Literally, once you finish, will get you a job. You just have to get the technicality of the degree. Or the third one is you're amazing at what you do. You know it because the world's been telling you. All your peers tell you. You have clients. Like the world tells you that you are very skillful and good at what you do, and you are insane, and you're going to go for it. Like that's the only other. Nothing else makes sense to do an MFA, especially if you don't have the money part. It's very expensive. You tend to have to go to a private school, which is $50,000-$60,000 a year. Very few jobs require it. Very few jobs exist for it. And it's a niche world where if you don't have the knowledge and connections of the fine art world, of the events, the wining and dining, the exhibitions, the history, the donors, the non-for-profits, if you don't know that, which I didn't know at all, and I've finally been learning it, you're screwed. Like, you have no shot. It's like, yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's a weird degree to get, but I would recommend it for people who kind of, like, that's what they want to do. It's their life. They want to teach it. They want to go further with it. They want to expand. You should definitely do it. The MBA is a great idea. Both would be cool, since you do have both fields, you know. And and they're both terminal degrees, so you can get really important jobs or teach in either field with it. So
Yeah. I think I don't see myself being an educator, at least like in the next like 10 years of my life. If I were to get an MBA, it would be to like support my like my gallery business, because
Absolutely.
I mean, I've been doing it since I was 16 now, and I'm 20. And I've had 3 in Chicago, I've had 1 in Boston, and the goal would be to expand it like across Boston, across like the East Coast. But it's just hard. It's very hard. Like, especially, I thought like in a place like Chicago or Boston or New York where the art scene is more like vibrant, I thought it would be easier to get the word out. But I find that I'm grappling with a lot of people's attention. Like when you have
It's oversaturation.
exactly, you have so many other events to go to. It's a Friday night or a Saturday night. Like we've had good turnouts at all the events, but definitely like or my expectations are too high, or it's definitely not the goal that I wanted. But we've like my other friends who have gone to these shows or my family members, they've been like, this is insane. Like you should be really proud of what you want to do. But I think in terms of like any company, you want to have like exponential growth or like a steady growth. And I've been teetering on the like around 50 visual artists every time, around like 300, 400 guests every time.
That's great.
And like 8 musicians, which is great. But
You need to stop studying economics. You were too worried about it, the economics.
Yeah, maybe I'm too like anal about this. I'm sure like I'm really proud of what I do, and I'm proud of all the people who have helped me, all the musicians, the sound engineers, everyone who's doing this for free. Like literally all of these are either friends or a friend of a friend who's just doing it because they believe in the mission of like meeting people and getting your work out there. But it'd be nice to maybe have more locations or involve more schools. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. But I feel like maybe having an MBA would support me in like sales and marketing and philanthropy and
It would.
relations and things like that all go into having an event.
You will meet more people that do that. In the MBA world, you'll meet more people that just go to those events. In the MFA world, you'll meet people who actually work them, put them on, and do the art that is presented there. But what I've learned too is, and it's a really difficult thing to grapple with when you're an artist, is you got to learn how to market yourself, sell yourself, not in any like, gross way, but you have to market and sell what you do. I don't like the word brand, but you have to sell whatever it is that you're doing. And sometimes you have to have a beneficiary, an investor, someone who knows the money side of it, that aren't looking at what you do. They're not looking at it through the lens of an artist, but through a capitalist who wants to make sure that everything's taken care of, people can get paid, you can get paid. It's a very difficult thing to reckon with as an artist. It's like probably it's the biggest deal with the devil you have to make. If you think that's the devil, it doesn't have to be, But if you're strong and you have a good mind, you can keep people around you that have good intentions. They're not trying to, use you to make money. It's just really hard. It takes a lot of failing, a lot of events to put on. You learn what works and what doesn't. But if you go the MBA route, 2 things will happen. You'll end up being around people who go to those events and know a lot about it and have the money for it. And the second thing is when you get to put that on your email or whatever it is, and you're reaching out to people and they see that, you get put into a whole new category, a whole new box. And I know this firsthand, being broke and not going to college. My plan was not to go to school. I was going to be a carpenter. And I didn't become a carpenter because I graduated in May 2008. I went to 3 different unions to apply, and it was the housing crash of 2008. And they all told me 7-year wait. Which is insane.
Wow.
For not even college, just to be a tradesman.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I can't wait 7 years. So I guess I'll go to like the local community college until I figure out what I want to do. What I really want to do is what we've been talking about: podcasts, music, festivals, recording bands, producing stuff. I was just told by my parents I couldn't. They're like kind of what you mentioned earlier. Your mom. We never fully touched on that, but you said art to your mom, and she was like,
yeah, she was like, I support this passion for art. I don't know how viable it is for your financial well-being and for your future. And she always trusted my judgment. She was like, you're a smart kid. You got into Harvard. Like, I think you know what you're doing, but just keep in mind, like, nobody around us is an artist. Nobody who is an artist who we know, which we don't know too many, like, not a lot of them are making a living that they're comfortable with. And she was just like, make sure you're making an informed decision. Like, she'll never tell me what to do, where to go, who to hang out with, but she'll ask me to consider every side, which I appreciate about her. But she definitely was not super, like, she wasn't super happy. She never convinced me to get out of it, but she was like, maybe add a little minor in there. maybe do something else.
I mean, it's true. It's very practical. It's very realistic. There is not a lot of money in the arts. There should be. There's more than enough money on the planet for it. It's not allocated there. It's not put there. It's a very sad. It's unfortunate. It's ruining schools, community centers. It's ruining the social lubrication. Like, I believe art is the lubrication of humanity. I believe that anyone who thinks you should only put money in the STEMs is insane, because I always say, in between the gaps of the science, the scientist, the technologist, the engineer, and the mathematician, what do they all do in their existence? For fun, for leisure, for pleasure, for a hobby? It's art. Either consuming it, watching it, wearing it, eating it, looking at it, playing with it. It doesn't really matter. It's art. So deny art its due is very naive, and it's wrong. It's 50-50 perfect through all technology. Without that, I mean, look at someone like Steve Jobs. Not
He's
an
a
engineer.
designer.
An artist. Designer. He's just an artist. Not an engineer at all. Like, not at all. Could not create what he's been selling, what he sold. But he was an artist, and he thought about it in a different way, and he made technology fun and interesting and sexy and cool, like he just did with design, with art. And cars are like that. This table is like that. This microphone cable does not need to be outside of it, but it looks cool. You're like, what is this? And it helps market, helps sell it. So I don't know where I'm getting with this rant, but I just know that it's sad and it's frustrating, but what it can do, okay, that's what I was getting with it. Not having the degrees, just going to high school. And then once I started, finishing associates, okay, now I can use it to get a bachelor's. Finish that. Then I saw how I was treated differently with just a bachelor's degree. By society, by the police. I always was running in with the police. By the police, by society, by my neighbors, by trying to date. I mean, the list goes on of how you're looked at differently every time you get a degree. Man or woman, it's different for each person, but you are looked at differently. You're treated differently.
For sure.
You throw in a graduate degree, especially like an MBA, and people automatically can look at you and assume so much without even talking to you. They already know, okay, well, they're driven, they work hard, they went through 2 different degrees. Especially if you went to a really good school, then they're really going to see that. It says so much about your maturity. You're probably trusted by people. If you got this far in life, people trust you. You might even be looked up to or be a mentor to people, because usually when you go that far, it takes a lot of work and you tend to be older, more mature. A higher IQ type of person. So they could assume all that without even communicating with you. Now they got that out of the way. Now whatever it is you tell them, it's already put at a high standard. It's lifted up above someone else that could have sent the exact same email but didn't have those credentials.
Yeah, for sure.
So it does that. It opens up doors and worlds that you never thought were possible. Impossible without the gatekeeping of the degrees, And that's true for a lot of jobs, a lot of cool clubs, about the degrees you get, which is also not fair, and it's kind of frustrating, I'm sure there's a lot of those crazy ones at Harvard, the craziest ones in the world, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
The clubs.
I know a lot of people Harvard is an amazing institution. I don't need to say more. Like, it's an amazing place, and every single day I wake up and I'm reminded by my parents or by my hometown friends, like, it's a privilege to be where I am, and I never want to forget that. But it's a place with faults like any other place. And I think a lot of people choose Harvard, I don't want to say for the wrong reasons, because if it's the right reason for you, it's the right reason for you. But definitely, when I talk to a lot of my friends of why did you choose Harvard, or a lot of my friends were choosing between Stanford or Yale or other amazing places, they were like, oh, well, the name has a lot of weight, a lot of authority. Even if you don't want to, like, for example, you think Harvard, or at least I thought Harvard, and I definitely didn't think art, I didn't think film, I didn't think like actors. But a lot of I have 2 good friends of mine who were between Yale and Harvard, and I don't know about you, but I think Yale and Harvard for the arts, and I think, Yale. The Yale MFA.
They do have one of the better art schools.
Yeah, they do, for acting, for everything. But when it comes to like directing or trying to get a film out there to be produced, like, apparently the Harvard network is better, from what my friends have said. And even though the classes, like, a lot of my friends were a little frustrated with like the class. I mean, my major is called art, film, and visual studies. That's the whole major. So that's anywhere from like cinematography to photography to painting to sculpture. Everything is one major. So a lot of the classes offered, they're not super extensive because it's kind of like 4 big areas in one major. And we share a lot of like teachers and facilities. And a lot of my friends were a little let down, especially when they have friends at RISD or Parsons or institutions that are more known for the arts, by the classes that were offered, or the attention that the teachers could give. But they found that the networks were huge. But that's not something that is really taught in a classroom, right? Like you have to like go out there and email people. You have to cold email, cold text people. You have to see who knows somebody who you want to get to. That's where things like LinkedIn come in. Like you can kind of see like the this person is one connection away or two connections away. Like you really have to leverage that network. And in terms of Harvard, like that's how people get their artwork bought, or that's how people get a movie to be produced.
Yeah.
That's how you can kind of get that, is to try to find someone who knows somebody who you want to talk to. And even though at Harvard that's more normalized, like to network and to talk to people and to try to find someone who you want to talk to, it's not something that is kind of said out loud too much. You kind of just have to like realize it through other people. But that's something that is not exclusive to Harvard. Like networking is not exclusive to Harvard. You can do that anywhere, even if you go to like a community college, or if you go to like a state school. Networking and meeting people is something that you should always try to do if you're trying to find a room that you want to be into, but you are not in yet. Like try to leverage your network and the people that you know.
Yeah.
For sure. So.
Yeah, but there's probably a lot of other interesting clubs there, because I've heard that about a lot of the more prestigious schools, not just Ivy League, but like Northwestern University of Chicago, schools like that. They have such a big endowment. They have a lot of money for clubs and activities, things like that. And I feel like, are you a part of any clubs or any activities there?
Yeah, I'm a part of a few extracurriculars. I mean, I work for the communications office. I'm in a club called Latinos in Finance and Technology. I'm trying to make the Harvard Yale Art Gallery like a club right now. I'm trying to register it as a club. But I think you'd be surprised at like how little money these institutions give their clubs.
Oh, really?
At least, I mean, Harvard has over 500 clubs. And usually they're funded by, it's called the student activities fee, where I don't know how much it is. I think it's like a few $100s that out of people, like part of what you pay for when you go to Harvard, it's like the tuition, the room and the board, but it's student activities fee, it's insurance, it's a lot of like minute things. And a lot of people are choosing to opt out of the students activities fee. Like they can refund you now. So these clubs are working with like smaller and smaller amounts every year that has to be distributed to the same like 500, 400 clubs. So the clubs themselves don't have too much money that Harvard will give them, but it's through Harvard's smaller departments. So they have like a Harvard's Women office. We have like the Harvard Foundation for like cultural and race relations. We have like we have a bunch of different funds and smaller departments where you can apply to funds directly from them. Okay. And that's like 500 here, 1,000 there, 1,000 here.
Yeah.
Maybe when you think of like Harvard or Yale or whatever clubs, maybe you think of like the final clubs. At least those are like the exclusive like fraternities that Harvard has. Okay. The final clubs, and those are privately funded by the alumni. And that is like in the thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Okay. Princeton has eating clubs. Yale has secret societies.
You said eating clubs?
Eating clubs. That's what they call them. Yeah, they all call them different things, and they have different like traditions and customs, and like the level of secrecy varies. Like I know at the...
What are some things you've heard? You got to tell us.
You're
like, oh no, I can't say.
No, I mean, it varies on school. It varies depending on the school, but yeah, I mean, they have a bunch of trips. Like some people, we call them punch at Harvard. So it's like you have to, I call them like fancy fraternities. That's what I've always said. I'm also a tour guide for Harvard. So when people ask this,
you're a tour guide.
I'm a tour guide for Harvard.
I'll come and get a tour soon.
You definitely should. It's a fun tour. I like our tour.
That sounds really cool.
It's a fun job to have. You meet a bunch of really cool people every day. But they're always like, oh, how's the frat life or the like nightlife at Harvard? I'm like, well, we don't have frats. Technically, we don't have frats because of a lawsuit that happened in like 2019. So we don't have any frats at Harvard. We have like Sig Chi and like Alpha Phi, but Harvard doesn't recognize them. So they're kind of like on their own, like doing their own thing. And they're not like a huge part of the social scene at Harvard. But we have like the Fly, we have the Bee, we have the Fox. Like those are the final clubs that, I don't know if you've seen like The Social Network.
Sure.
Like that's like a movie that like mentions like these secret societies, these final clubs.
And that tends to be where like the wealthiest students go to?
The stereotype is like international students or legacy students or athletes. I'm trying to think of other ones. New York is a big hub as well.
Okay.
But basically you can't like rush them like a frat, where like a frat or sorority, anyone can like apply to join and like you go through these rounds and stuff. With the final clubs, at least at Harvard, they punch you, which is like you get an invitation either through your email or like an Instagram DM or a card underneath your door. They invite you to apply to be into the club. And you go through different rounds. I think it's like 3 rounds or whatever. And you apply, and that's your sophomore fall typically. So sophomore fall is like super hectic because everybody is like rushing, like 4 or 5 of them at once. And the craziest thing I've heard about this process is like for one of the clubs, like I think they flew out, I think the 2nd or 3rd round, they flew them out to like London, and they went to London for a weekend, and that was like a thing that they did. Other ones of these, like they go to Maine, like they have a retreat in Maine, and you go and you drink a bunch of alcohol and have a lot of fun. I don't know, but it's not super crazy. Like,
You don't strike me as someone that wants to be in those clubs. Or do you want to be in those
I got punched. I mean, I'm a junior now, so I'm not in it. I went through the process.
The way you did. My hands are clean. I'm not in this.
Well, it's kind of like a relief. Like we call it like the sophomore slump because it's just like you're dealing with harder classes, you're applying to internships, and like 3 times of the week you have to go to this like the Fox or the Fly or whatever, and like go to this event for like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. So it's a very time consuming process. But I've heard, I don't know if this is true, I've heard only 5% of Harvard is in these final clubs. So it's very, very small.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very small part of Harvard. But that's all they do. They party. You get access to the alumni network, which tend to be like very wealthy, very famous people in like government or entertainment. So I think if you leverage the network, I've heard that's a huge advantage. But essentially, it's just a place to like meet people and party and have fun. It's kind of like, I call it a fancy frat because that's essentially what it is.
It sounds like every single one, but very, very high. I'm going to London for the weekend. Ooh, who's paying for these flights?
The alumni.
Oh my God. Yeah, there's a little bit of a nefarious circle going on there. This feedback loop, an infinite feedback loop of like alumni, kid, club, connection, alumni, kid, club, connection. Like, I don't like that at all.
Yeah, but they're pretty. I have friends who go to state schools, and from what I understand, it's pretty similar to like the frat thing.
It is. I don't like it there either. Any of my students that bring that up, I'm always like, don't create your own. You don't need that stuff. Make your own network. Make your own webs. Don't rely on other people you don't know. They're gonna have something. They're gonna hang it over. It's just never gonna go well in the end, unless you want to be part of the problem. Then it could go great for you. You can keep perpetuating it.
I think you make what you want of it.
Yeah.
And if you really need that like community, then you can join and be a part of that community. But I think the good thing about Harvard or like any MIT, any Boston school is like, again, I said 5% of Harvard are in these final clubs. It's not a huge part of the social scene.
Yeah.
On an average weekend at Harvard, a lot of my friends, we go into Boston. We go take a train down to New York. We go to like our friends at BU, our friends at MIT. Like it's like the world is not Harvard. The Harvard bubble is so real where people think it's like Harvard is like the entire world and it's their life. It's only your life for 4 years.
Yeah.
So after that, you got to learn, you got to get a job, you got to socialize. I'm in Boston. Like I'm frequently reminded, I'm in Boston. We have so many amazing schools like in the city, just a train ride away. So I try to get into Boston.
And it's
as much as I
amazing
can.
location. Like you said, you can go to New York, Philly, Portland, Maine. You know, you can go to Connecticut. You just
New Hampshire,
Providence, Rhode Island. I mean, anything. Yeah, go up to Vermont, New Hampshire. Oh yeah, it's a beautiful area. I love that area. I've been to Boston once on a road trip. I drove through Harvard, and I don't know. I didn't see much. I went to like the Cheers bar. Went to Fenway, but I did. You know, I was on a road trip. I did classic
Typical Boston things.
Yeah, I was like, I have to go see Fenway, and I have to go see the Cheers bar. And,
it's good. Not as good as Chicago, but it's good. I still love Chicago way more.
Yeah, I love Chicago so much.
Yeah,
I like New York a lot. It's quite different. Kind of hard to compare it to Chicago. After spending a lot of time in New York, I'm sure you have as well. Very different from Chicago, and not really comparable. It's a different kind of industry, different type of culture around it, history, the type of people it attracts. People don't go there, or people don't go to Chicago to make it. They go to Chicago to do the work in the field they want to do. You know, it's a different kind of mentality. Whereas New York, LA, you go there to like make it in what you're doing, to be like the top, the 1% of the 1% in your field. Yeah. And Chicago's like, oh, I'll go there because like I can get a job and like do what I want. I can do my craft there and like hone in on it there. But Boston, I never know what to do or make of Boston because I only think of education when I think of Boston.
Yeah, it's a college town for sure.
Yeah, it's some of the best ones
in the world. A lot of academia there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think it's a cultural hub too. Like there's so many concerts, so many, and not just in the Boston, like Boston proper, like in Somerville and in Cambridge. Like there's so many like art nonprofits and open studios and like artist collectives that I try to go to like every once in a while. So it's a fun place to be. I'm definitely glad that I went to Harvard
Yeah.
over some other schools.
Yeah. What were some other schools you were thinking about?
I think people who I'm friends with like know this. It's like kind of a running joke, but I almost went to Yale. Like I applied early, restrictive early action to Yale. I was really sure I was going to go to Yale because of the better arts program, because a lot of my friends went to Yale. I'm sure as like an educator, you've probably heard of students who go to like these fly out programs. Like they go spend a weekend at whatever school they're going to, and they like those fly out programs, you get to go to a class, you get to meet professors, you get to have these like socials and things like that, just so you understand like what it's kind of like to go to these schools. And I went to both. At Yale, it's called Bulldog Days. At Harvard, it's called Visit Haas, and they're like one is right after the other. And I went to both, and both were incredible. But I remember when I applied early to Yale, like right after I had like my little like reaction video that I opened up my letter, and like I had me and my mom like sobbing, or I was sobbing. But I always tell people right after that video ended, my mom was like, "What's Yale?" Like she didn't know what Yale was. She was like, "What's Yale?" And like that's why I don't know. I try to help when I made like a list of like scholarships and opportunities that helped me and have helped my friends, and I try to like talk to people from my high school or people from other high schools in Chicago, and I give them that list and I tell them like, this is what you should do. I'd always leave it open. I'm like, if anybody is applying to college, like DM me, text me. I will look over your essay. I will help you choose between schools, because I know what it's like to navigate that process. I don't want to stay alone. My parents were always there. My mom was always there and like giving me love and support. But when someone they can't give you what they don't have. And they didn't know anything about Yale, about Brown, Princeton. I applied to like almost all the Ivies. I applied to 22 schools. Like I applied to a lot of schools.
I applied to 0.
But it still worked out. I mean, I think you're doing pretty well for yourself, I would say. I think you're doing pretty well.
Thanks.
But the point is, like, sometimes when you're like a first gen student, like you're really scared. Like when I describe like my college application process, it was scary. It was really, really scary to navigate that. And I was just super panicked. Like I think what helped me really like in high school and even in college, like do well, quote unquote, is like nothing drives you more than like fear and panic of like, there's no safety net. Like I gotta get a full ride. I have to go to a good school. I have to get a good job because I love my family and I love my parents, but they're not there to support me financially if all else fails, you know? And you have to give back. And I have friends who are first gen students like me, and sometimes they have to pay for their mortgage or sometimes they have to help with a bill. Like these are the realities that a lot of students are facing.
Absolutely.
And you have to take that into consideration when you're applying to schools. And I didn't know. Point of this is I didn't know, and I applied to as many schools as possible because I didn't know what the financial aid was going to look like. I applied to as many scholarships as possible because I didn't know how much money it was going to cost me. But as like, to make this more lighthearted, I always tell people that I think it's funny. When I got into Yale, my mom was like, "What's Yale? And what's Connecticut? What's that Connecticut?" Like she had never heard of Connecticut. She didn't know where Yale was. And like on Ivy Day, I like opened up my letter and one of the schools was like Columbia. And my mom called like my family in Mexico and she was like, "Oh my God, Katherrin went into Yale and Harvard and Columbia." And my aunt was like, "Why would you go to Colombia? They're going to kill her, the cartels. Like it's so dangerous." And my mom was like, "No, like Columbia, the school, not the nation." So
not the country.
Not the country. So I definitely get it when students, especially as a tour guide, a lot of people who go on these tours are people who are applying to Harvard or places like Harvard, and I try to help them in whatever capacity that is, like looking over their essays or making the decision. Because that's, I think, online, like on YouTube, you can find a lot of help about how to write your essays, how to apply to the schools, but nobody really tells you how to choose between the schools. And I think that's a huge part of it too. Like once you get in, how do you determine like where do you want to live? What kind of people you want to be surrounded by? What academic environment do you want? All these little things. People think like, "Oh my God, I got into Harvard. Of course I'm going to go to Harvard or Yale or Princeton or Northwestern or whatever it may be." But you really have to reflect, like, is this a good fit for me? Like, would I be happy here? And I think that's a mistake that I see a lot of people make. And I know people at Yale and Princeton and Harvard and Stanford who got in because, of course, the names are really huge and they have a lot of weight, but they're not happy. And they have told me, like, I would have rather gone to my state school. Or I'd rather be home with my family. And they're not happy there. I would say that's the vast minority, but it's a shame that if you work so hard to get into these schools, like, you should be happy and you should be, like, relishing in your work. But a lot of them are sad or depressed even, or they just want to be back home, or they hate the cold weather. Like, little things like that you really don't think about, but they make a huge part of your college experience.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. To go even further than that, because those are all really important parts on the front end. Once you're in, what I always tell my students or anyone who's going to school is like the time and date in which you pick your classes, like the schedule you create, will make or break your college career. Because you can get into a school like Harvard, MIT, a great school. But if you're not a morning person or a night person, or you like your Fridays or you like your Monday, whatever it is, that works for you, it's so important. And a lot of students wait until the end. They wait until they can finally sign up, but it's like a week or two later. And I'm like, you know how fast these fill up. There's 20,000 people trying to fill up these classes.
No.
And they'll miss a good class or a good time, and now they can't take it, and they're so upset about it. I'm like,
No.
that's like one of the first things you need to learn, like how to. First of all, you should understand how to get the degree. Every class, what they stand for, what part of the school they're in. Are they in science? Are they in humanities? You need to understand these things. But picking your class schedule, you would think it's simple and straightforward. So many students wait and wait, and they get a bad schedule. Like, oh, this semester sucks. I have class on a Friday at 3, and then on a Thursday, it's all over the place. I'm like, why didn't you pick your right?
It's strategy.
Yeah,
It's
strategy. You got to pick the right classes. The only thing that got me through not Columbia University, Columbia College in Chicago,
Still
and
an
the
amazing
Art
school.
Institute. Great school if you're going into what I did. What I did, those schools are great.
Yeah.
But the classes, the times, the class, the day,
The
of the week.
professor.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
professor.
you got to look at rate my professor.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Professors.
They could be the same class, but teachers like grade things differently, assign tasks differently, and that'll make or break your experience for sure.
Or students who took the class, right? What was it like? What were they
Yeah.
like? Because there are students that'll be like, yeah, I liked him for this, this, and that. Like I had a professor at the Art Institute, amazing professor, Bob Snyder. He created the first sound program at a university, at a school in 1975. And he even told me himself, he's very old school. He was professor emeritus, so he had nothing to lose anymore. And he acted that way. I loved him. But he was like, you don't want to take a class with me. And I was like, why? He's like, I'm too strict. And I'm like, but I like that about professors because I'm going to come to class every day. My attendance is not a problem for me. I'm going to be here. This is $60,000 a year. I'm not even supposed to be here, so I'm going to be here. And sure enough, I took 2 of his classes. They were very strict. He voided the rules of the department. They said you get 3 absences. He's like, you get 1.
Wow.
He's like, I don't care what they say because you can't fire
Wow.
someone who's professor emeritus. The worst thing you do is like stop teaching. Like that's all you can do to them. Like they're getting their pension. They've been at the school for 40 years. But he ignored any rules and was just like, no, this, and that. If he caught you on your phone, even just to look at the time, he'd be like, out.
Wow.
Like zero tolerance. I loved it because
Wow.
I don't like being on my phone when I'm trying to learn, talk, teach. Speaking of phones, are the AirPods, are they an issue at school? Do a lot of students have issues with them?
No, I find that a lot of professors at Harvard, especially the tenured ones, maybe you described a little bit about this with your experience, but I think once you're tenured, like a lot of the stress goes away. And I always say that the best part about Harvard is like the people. Either that's like the professors or the students that you meet, more than the classes and what you like learn. And that's, I think, what people think of when they think of Harvard and Yale and Oxford and all these incredible institutions. You think of like the world-class education that you're getting. And I think just as equally as important as like the classes are the people that you meet and the interactions you have. And what people tend to say a lot about like Harvard professors is like once they're tenured, like they're focused on their research or their book, or they're doing like TED Talks or interviews, or like Harvard is like doesn't take up, like Harvard is usually not their main thing. Like they're usually doing their research or, like I said, all the other things, that interviews, other things like that. And so it's kind of hard to find time to meet with a professor at Harvard. And I feel like that's like that dedicated attention is something that you might find more in like a state school or another school where the professors just have more time, or the department might be a little more smaller. But yeah, I don't even know what tangent I was going to go off of. This is going to have a point to this, but I completely.
I was asking about like AirPods and phones in
go.
class. Are there any issues with students and being distracted by that, being on it, being kind of disrespectful to other students or the professor while they're talking, anything like that? Because I have a massive issue with it.
Really?
At my schools, but it could be because the school isn't called Harvard and it doesn't cost $60,000 a year, and it's not pooling the people that are, for lack of better words, and I love nerds, but super nerds that like just want it, like are obsessed with learning and getting books at the library as a little kid and actually went through them. Like you're from one nerd to another. I love people who are very smart and very much into their craft and learning, whether or not it's traditional or on their own. Doesn't really matter. I love it, but if your student body doesn't really have that inherently, and they feel like where they're at isn't like the best school, so like I have nothing to lose, I'm at some crappy state school or something, I guess I'll just be on my phone, because it is a big problem. I didn't know if it was a problem there. It could be just the name alone kind of weeds out people from doing that. They don't want to screw it up. They don't want to get kicked out of class at such a nice school. It could be embarrassing. I don't know.
I've never seen or heard of anyone being kicked out of a class. I will say just like Harvard kids are just like a lot of other kids, like we're social. Sometimes we are like really easily distracted by our phones. But I think we might just be a little more like covert about it. Or yeah, like I see like, especially in the really big lectures, like the big ones at Harvard are like Ec 10A, Ec 10B, like micro and macro. They have like upwards of 700 students in that lecture. It's huge.
Yeah.
And it's like a hallmark of Harvard. Like even if you're not an economics major or minor, everyone takes that class. It's like super, super popular at Harvard. And like sitting at the very back, like I'll see people on their MacBooks, like sending texts or emails or whatever. Like we're very easily distracted.
Just
I think just
a little
like
more
any
clever.
other. Yeah, you might just not like pull out your phone and take a call or make it super
do
obvious.
it on your laptop where thing
A lot of
you're
people do
allowed
on
to
there.
have is
Yeah.
a laptop, so you can get away with it.
But I think it depends on the professor, because even in that class, they were like, okay, the first like however many rows, like if you're sitting in the front of the classroom, basically no laptops, only pen and paper, because you do retain. Psychology says you retain information better if you write on pen and paper with your own handwriting, highlighting, all that stuff. So if you want to take notes like the traditional way, you sit in the front. And then he's like, I don't encourage, at least in that class, like Ec 10A, he's like, I don't encourage laptops in class whatsoever. But if you're going to use one, sit in the back of the class. And so I would sit in the back of the class, and then I would see a bunch of people like answering emails or text messages or whatever.
Yeah.
And now that there's like, I think post-COVID, the world has shifted, both like in academia and like just general like white collar work has shifted more towards like virtual instead of like in-person things. And so a lot of classes have, especially these really big like econ lectures, they have a hybrid option, like a virtual in-person option where you can go to the lecture in person, but usually they're recorded. So, and I think it's not just Harvard. I think Yale, Princeton, a lot of these institutions are doing this now where they'll record every lecture and they'll upload it online. So if you don't want to go to class at 9 in the morning, you can go and rewatch it in your own time on 2 times speed and take notes whenever you want. So that's, I think, what a lot of my friends are doing now, more than like their phones. I think just the convenience of like technology has made it so we don't have to go to class in person. Like it's recorded. And if the professor's a little like talks really slow, or if he like tends to talk about his wife and his dog for like 30 minutes at a time, like it's much nicer if you're at home in your comfy little bed, you can like fast forward or ×2 speed it and just like hop over the clips that are relevant to what you're learning.
And that works well in a class like that. Very specific subject matter, 700 people. You're not getting any FaceTime anyway with the professor. You're not even getting like that fun community you get in small classes. You're not getting any of that. So I guess I understand that, but the online thing for the arts, something visual, something sonic, small classes, it's so much more fun to be there to, first of all, a lot of these students don't even have access to good sound systems, so now they get to listen to their work on a good sound system. And then they get to be with other people that are, because it's an esoteric field, sound, that's where I'm at. So to have other students in there, it's not like an economy class or another class where a lot of people are learning about this, hundreds of people take it. You can find yourself meeting people like that when you just go out and about. You'll meet them. But finding people who know a lot about sound and only sound, that's the craft, you can't just meet them randomly. It's not that common. So you meet them in the class. It's the best place to meet them. And then you get something even better. You get the professor, myself, who, again, you don't get many sound professors in the world. So now you get someone who's kind of in a niche field. It's the best place to learn and get the feedback, talk about stuff, ask questions, be pointed in the right direction, learn about DIY ways of soundproofing your studio. You name it. And so it makes sense that in a bigger class, like what you said, students will stay back, maybe watch the lecture. But in classes that I teach, it makes no sense.
Creative classes, you can't do that.
No,
for sure.
It makes no sense, especially that visceral feedback where I could sit there and hear what they're listening to and tell them exactly what they did well, right. I can tell them what they did. I can reverse engineer what I hear and be like, okay, you did this, this, and that. This is the effect you did. You panned things here. This is your level here. You don't really get that at home when you're listening to a project, and I got to type it in an email. And then what if they don't know some of the words I use because they're new to that class? In person, I could be like, okay, so a better word to use for that might be this, this, and that.
Yeah.
Just things like that you can't do in a big lecture. And sometimes those lectures, I've watched a lot of professors' lectures on YouTube. It's amazing that you can have that. I mean,
it just increases the accessibility of it for sure.
It's especially people who don't have access to it, people who can never go to a school like that for whatever reason. It's amazing. But yeah, some classes they need to be in person. They need to be small.
Yeah.
And they need to be they need good resources, like what you were saying earlier, teachers, buying their own stuff for their students. My sister's an elementary school teacher and has been for over 10 years, and she's always buying stuff.
Yeah.
Super underpaid, buying stuff. Yeah. And you wonder, why would someone ever go to a school like Harvard with that name that promise, and then just go backwards to $43,000 a year at like the local elementary school. You probably don't get too many people who go to Ivy League schools and then go back into, K through 8th grade.
Yeah, or at least not right away. Although I do have a few friends who like they're getting a minor in education, or at Harvard we have like the Phillips Brooke House institution, or it's like a building they have over like 1,000 volunteers. A lot of Harvard students are involved, and they basically they have so many dozens of programs where you can give back to like communities in Cambridge and in Boston while you're like a student there.
That's awesome.
And it could be like citizenship tutoring, or tutoring like kids in local like K through 12, or I don't know, organizing like lectures with the local community. But the point is like Harvard tries to, and now this year is the first year that they've offered a civic engagement certificate, where I think it's like 300 plus hours of service, plus like 3 courses out of a catalog that involve like community service and like interacting with like or community service or policy work. And then you write like an essay, you do a retreat, and I feel like those are the main components, and that goes into the civic engagement certificate, and it's the first certificate of its kind. So Harvard, I can't speak to other institutions, but definitely we're trying to be more, we're trying to implement like service and giving back to communities in a small capacity. Like a little certificate with 3 classes and 300 hours of service isn't going to change the world, but it's a start.
It's a start.
Encouraging a generation of students and more to give back to their communities in any way that they can. So that's, I think, really, really nice.
That is really nice. Is that some like a plan you want to do with the art galleries you've been setting up? Something more non-for-profit, community service? Yeah.
So I'm getting the certificate in civic engagement, and but for that there was like a few hoops that I had to jump through. So that's part of the reason why I also chose to like incorporate my art gallery as like a 501c3 nonprofit. So that happened. I was also in a class called Creative Entrepreneurship, where they really heavily like supported you in like incorporating whatever it may be, like if it's a for-profit, a nonprofit, whether it's research or a gallery, or some people were selling like a grill cleaning service, like literally any sort of like business that you wanted to start. That class was a really good start to do it. And they gave you like a mentor and everything. So that really helped me in like incorporating it. So it's now officially like a 501c3 nonprofit. But I don't have like a banking account for it. That's just the start of way more things that I have to. I need to have like officers and directors, and
it's
so
a whole
much.
thing.
I'm working on a website for it now, like an email for it now, just for it to be more like to have more authority. So when next semester, hopefully, I want to start organizing a Boston-wide art gallery. That's like my next goal, to involve like MIT and BU and BC and Wellesley and Northeastern and all these like colleges in Boston. I want to have like a gallery that just unites all of these students from all these different institutions into one art show. So that's my next goal with that. But that just requires a lot of time and effort and fundraising and
Have you done fundraising?
Not officially. No, I mean, the last show that I did in Chicago was like May of my freshman year of college. So last year, 2023, in like May. And I had 2 interns. I called them interns. They were like high school friends. But I'm like 3 years older than them. But they were like helping me with the marketing and like the fundraising. And one of them, I think he did like a chocolate drive or something. I don't know what he did, but he fundraised like $200. So that helped me. So it's like, it's fundraising technically, but $200 is going to buy like some nails and hammers to put up the artwork. Like, it's not going to make or break the show, but it is a lot of help. It's a lot of help.
That's a whole other world, the fundraising thing. Whenever I'm told that, which is now more and more like, oh, you need to raise money, and I'm like, I'm just like, I don't even understand where to begin with raising money. I have a hard time making money. How am I supposed to raise the money and then not even use it? I don't know much about fundraising. Not any like that way. I obviously, when I was a kid in baseball, sold chocolate. World famous.
I was a Girl Scout.
I did that stuff. Oh, it made $35 per box. Like, I don't even. When you have 100 kids doing it, I guess you can make some money. But yeah, so the fundraising thing, I definitely can't give any advice or help with that. But putting on events and getting people to help, or finding talent, sound stuff, lighting stuff. That's a world I know very well. So yeah, if you ever need help with that, I know
thank you so much.
People that do that.
In Boston?
In Boston, I do know some people. I have some friends that are from there. Older, like I'm 34, so much older. But in Chicago's, I know a lot of people here. So with that, so do you, because you're from here. So it's not as hard when you're from here. But Boston, that's a little trickier, especially nowadays, the generational drift between us.
Yeah. Well, you'd be surprised. Like my first sound guy for my first show, he was like my friend's dad, who's like 50 something, and he brought like everything. So I think that's what I also like about these shows and like these artist collectives that I've been involved with. That it's like art is like the common denominator that everybody loves. Like you said, you either consume it, you eat it, you watch it, you hear it. You can't go a day without seeing it anywhere, on the radio, on billboards, on the TV.
It's everywhere.
Ads. You can't escape it. But I think most people wouldn't even consider themselves like artists or creative people. But when you realize that it's like truly around you, and it doesn't take much to just like look at a poster, look at a gallery, or hear music that you like, you're a consumer, and you're involved in the arts. So I found that even though people might not consider themselves like visual artists or creatives, especially at a place like Harvard, which like the most popular majors are like biology and econ and
finance or something.
Yeah, we don't have finance, but we have econ.
okay.
So that's like the really big one. But people still like volunteered and like did photography for free or helped me set up the show for free. Like I think if people believe in your message and your mission and realize like, hey, guess what? I'm not earning anything. I'm actually losing money. I'm putting my own money into this because I believe so strongly in this mission. And they see that, okay, all the musicians who are like at my gallery, like the mariachis, like the Harvard mariachis performed. They literally performed at the White
Harvard
House.
Mariachis?
The Harvard mariachis, the only mariachis at Harvard. I didn't know we had one until I came, but they literally performed at the White House. Like they do gigs and they get paid to do them, and they did it for free because they believed in this.
Yeah.
So you'd be surprised. People want to volunteer their time if they believe in your mission and they realize like, hey, I'm not getting anything out of this either. Like it's just for fun.
Yeah, people want to do it more than you realize. When you're first starting something, I'm glad you brought this up because everything you said, I've been through and 100% agree. Everyone that ever helped with 10 years of this festival, DZ Fest, these posters are behind us all for free. And again, it always helped them knowing that I was also doing it all myself and lost money, just like you said. After a decade, that's the craziest investment of all time. But so that helped people not to be like, well, if I was making a ton of money and then not paying anyone, that wouldn't go over well.
Yeah.
So they saw how much heart and drive I had into it, the passion. And it was, it's contagious. It's addictive. People want to help. They saw that the sum of it, the end of it, was so much bigger than our individual parts. They saw the effect it made on the community. They saw it that when they wore a DC Fest shirt out somewhere, someone would be like, hey, I've been there. Like, thing's amazing. Like, they saw the fruits of their labor as well. So did I. But at a certain point, the fun, trying to get the funds impossible. I had to just keep investing in all my own stuff.
Wow.
You know, it was brutal. But it made work in other places. It made people want to come record with me so I can make work around the year.
The relationships are the best part of these.
Insane relationships and connections. Like the best I've ever had. Some of the best friends I still have to this day.
Yep.
Because we suffered through it too. I'm sure after you
Trauma
finish the
bonds
event,
people,
right?
for sure.
At the end of the event, when it ends at 11 or midnight and you're like cleaning up, I bet you there's a certain bond between you and your peers, you know, or the next day when you talk about it, whatever it is, or even someone you see on down the street or in school that brings it up because they went to it. Like, oh, Katherrin, I loved your event. You know, XYZ, it was great. Yeah. That helps to keep it going. But you're pretty darn intuitive and wise to have these thoughts at 20 years old, to be honest. I wish more people were like that.
I think you just got to learn through experimenting and putting yourself out there. And I think that's what really is stopping like a lot of people not to be all like wise and giving some general like advice that nobody asked for. But I feel like a lot of people, what stops them from achieving like their biggest dreams. And like I said, I was involved with a lot of nonprofits in Chicago, either working with them or benefiting from them as like a student. And so many of my peers were like, I want to do what you did, or I want to do a show, or I want to apply to this competition, or I want to get this grant, get this scholarship, get into this school. They don't even make the first step of like doing it, applying, thinking that they're capable of doing it. And like if you had asked me like 5 years ago, did I think I was going to have an art show, go to Harvard, get like a full ride? Like I would have been like, absolutely not. Like I'm lucky if I get into college and like can minor in art. Like that would have been like my biggest dream. But I think it's just allowing yourself to fail like constantly. And I feel like maybe it's because we live in like a digital age where everything can be captured and memed and like can go viral, and you kind of risk like when things are like recorded and things are on the record, like you might be afraid to make mistakes publicly or try something because you don't know if people are going to talk behind your back or if people are going to judge you or people are going to criticize you. But I think everyone who's done these events or have been educators or students, like you can't get to where you are until you've fucked up at least like 100 times. Like you have to, fucking up is part of the process. Like making mistakes is part of the process. And the reason that you learn what works, what doesn't work, how to get these grants, how to get these musicians, or how to apply to the school, you have to have failed a bunch of times. I got rejected from a bunch of schools. I got rejected from a bunch of grants. Countless musicians told me no. Countless venues told me no. But if you internalize it and you think something's wrong with me, or I'm not capable enough, or I can't, like, you're gonna be your own worst enemy. Like, you really have to be delusional sometimes and be naive and say, like, maybe after the 25th no, I'll get one yes or whatever. Like, you really can't let failure stop you. And I think that's what's stopping so many students and so many young people whose egos are like fragile and who might have not lived too much. Like, you don't want to fail. Failing is painful to your ego, to your image, to your social...
Everything.
It's painful. It's embarrassing. Nobody likes to fail, but you have to fail. Like, you really do have to fail 1,000,000 times. And that's just proof that you're trying, that you're putting yourself out there. And that you're making progress, because with every failure, if you internalize it, you're not going to get far. But if you think and reflect, and I like to journal a lot. And so whenever not every single time that I failed, but if I had like a major setback, or a friendship ended, or I didn't get a program that I really wanted to get into, or an internship or whatever, I'll like sit down and I'll think, like, could I have done something better? Did I not try hard enough? Was I sleep deprived? Like, analyze really like what caused these failures? Like, is it just luck? Is it yourself? And more often than not, like, I think it's really easy to point a finger, and humans, we love to do this. Like, it's not my fault, it's my parents' fault, or I was poor, or my friends weren't supporting me, or I'm the victim and the world is against me. But you're not going to get far like that. You really have to take responsibility. And like, when you fuck up, it's oftentimes your fault. Sometimes it's luck, but most of the time it's your own fault. And all you can do is just get back up and try again. That's really the only thing you can do. Because the world isn't going to change from one day to the next. You got to just reevaluate, have a new strategy, and try again. And that's how you get amazing things to happen.
Yeah, and the biggest caveat of that is you realize nobody actually cares. Like, at the end of the day, no one really cares. Like, people care, like, pretty much your parents, whoever you're, like, married to, and, like, your kids. About the only ones who really, really care. Like, not just what's happening, what's going to be, how you feel tomorrow and in the future. They care. But besides that, most people don't care. People don't want you to die or, like, get hurt. But they don't care because they're worried about themselves, their next thing. You messed up on stage and you flubbed and you're having like a mental breakdown because you made a mistake. But 99% of the people don't know you even made it because they thought whatever you did was intended. And they're on to like worrying about themselves and like, oh man, did I have too much drinks? How am I supposed to get home? Uber's kind of expensive. Does this girl like me? I don't know. That's where everyone goes. No one's sitting there going like, can you believe Katherrin said the wrong word in that phrase on stage? I'm never going to let her live this down for the rest of my life. I'm going to and what works about that is that, well, the funny thing about that, if someone ever said that to you, you can always laugh and be like, yeah, but I'm the one on stage. What are you doing? So how are you going to come at me when I'm the one who's trying? That's why that never works when someone makes fun of me for a mistake or, a bad festival year or a bad show or a bad podcast. But I'm like, they're going to happen, but I'm doing it. Yeah. What are you doing? Like, I'm just trying. Like, I can't promise everything I do is going to be great. Yeah. But I'm just trying it. I'm trying to learn what works, what's better. And you're going to fail. But did you learn this thing because I know this about failure, but it took me a while to learn it. And many years, and I have more years of experience than you. Did you learn this from the journaling you did? Like, how did you get this such a self-reflection at such a young age? Something that takes 20, 30, 40 years for people to figure out. You figured it out as a teenager. So how did that happen?
I think a lot of the values that people learn, even if you don't realize it, like I realized this maybe, I don't know, I can't pinpoint a year, but like definitely like in my later teen years. And you think that you came up with it by yourself. But then now that I'm thinking of it, I'm like, my mom planted those little seeds when I was a kid. Like when I was a kid, I was like, I tried so many things. I tried karate, I tried ballet, I tried writing, I would write songs, I tried piano, ukulele, guitar, singing, dancing. I tried a bunch of things. And in middle school, sometimes I got like teased for, kids are just cruel. Like they'll tease you for your physical appearance, for your clothes, for literally anything. And anything. I was a very like sensitive kid. Like when I was a little kid, I would cry all the time. If my friend like looked at me a certain way, if a kid didn't want to talk to me, be my whatever. Like I was a child and I was so sensitive. Maybe it's the only child in me. I don't know. But I would like run to my mom for support, and she would always say like, Katherrin, these are like two big lessons that I like now realize now that I'm older that I learned from my mom and just took me years to realize where it came from. But the main thing was like when people criticize you, when people judge you, like you have to feel like don't feel bad about yourself. Don't hold judgment against yourself. Find it in your heart to forgive that person and to pray for them and to hope that they're doing well. Because if somebody's going out of their way to like criticize you, whether that's in person or through comments or through me, whatever it may be, like think about how sour and how sad they must be with their own life, with their own like choices, that they're choosing to go out of their own way to make you feel bad. Like she was like, Katherrin, have you ever done that? Have you ever like made fun of a kid, or have you ever like talked shit about somebody? Like, have you done that to their face? And like, why did you do that? And I was like, I don't really feel like doing it. I've never really done that. And she's like, that's because you're happy with your life. You have a good family. You have good health. You have a house, a roof over your head. You have a decent education. Like you have all of your needs. When your needs are met, you don't really go out of your way. You don't have the time to judge people, to be sour, to make someone stay miserable. On the contrary, you want to help them. You want to, when your cup is filled, you want to pass that love to someone else.
Yes.
And so she was like, can you imagine if you're actively trying to take away from somebody, how sad you must be? Like, you don't know if they're getting abused or if they have a mental illness or if their parents aren't like present in their life. Like truly like pray for them, think about them, hope that they heal and that they become a better person. Because if they're taking it out on you, on a random person or acquaintance or a stranger, like, can you imagine how sad they are with their life? Like, they must really be going through it. Like, pray for them and hope that they get better. So I think empathy was something that she made it super clear to me at a very young age. Like, you have to hold empathy for people, even if they hurt you. I think especially if they hurt you, you have to hold empathy for them.
Turn the other cheek.
Exactly. Or just walk away. Walk away and focus on yourself. That's the only thing you can do. And two, she would tell me that you can't control what happens to you in life. Like, she couldn't control that her dad passed away when she was 3 years old. She couldn't control that my grandmother, her mom, was an orphan from Spain. Like during the Spanish Civil War, my grandmother like came to Mexico on a boat of like 400 kids. It was the only ship that went to Mexico. And at 3 years old, she lost her parents, she lost her cousins, she lost her entire life and was an orphan at 3 years old. And then she started a family, had 5 kids. My mom was the youngest one, but then my mom was 3 years old and her dad died. And her oldest sibling, she was like 15 at the time, had to drop out of school. She didn't even finish high school and go to work. Like all these things, whether it's like loss, health, your family situation, your finances, the place that you were born, all of this is out of your control. She's like, Katherrin, I can control that. You can control that maybe your dad and I aren't educated or that we don't speak English, but you can make the most of the opportunities that you were given. So don't whine about it. Don't complain about it. Know that you're unstoppable, I think this is too optimistic, but this is what she would tell me when I was young. Like, you can do anything. The world is your oyster. Whatever sees the world. And a more realistic way that I've chosen to interpret it is like, you can't choose what life hands you, the cards that you were dealt, right? You can't choose what I just said, income, health, your parents, the place that you were born in. Like, even just being in the United States, even if you're low income, you're doing better than like everyone in the world.
Everyone.
And that is so easy to forget. But when I go back to Mexico or when I call my family members in Argentina, and my dad grew up without running water. Like my cousins, a lot of them are living with tin roofs over their head. There's like holes in their walls. And forget about education. Forget about, should I follow my passion? No, they're thinking about food. They're thinking about, will I have clothes tomorrow? Will I have like a bed tomorrow? Like these are pressing needs that a generation in my family is like actively concerned about now.
Yeah.
And so she always told me like, Katherrin, being where you are, doesn't matter how shitty your life is or how frustrated you may be with your situation, like you're doing better than like 80% of the world and almost everybody in our family. Like just being in these states, just going and getting a public education is a privilege, and it's something that you had no control over. God gave you, we gave you. It's like out of your hands completely. Yeah. So if you think you're having a bad day, reflect in the context of the world. Are you really having a bad day? I mean, yes, but do the most with the opportunities that you were given, because a lot of people would kill to be in your spot.
Yeah.
And just you're in control of your own body, of your own mind for now that you're young and that you have opportunities ahead of you. So make the most of what you have. And obviously she said that to me in a much more concise and like simplified way as a child. But now I realize,
life, you know, she's probably said it here and there throughout your life.
Yeah.
Matured the words as you've gotten older with more realistic examples, heavy examples. Don't you love when your parents tell you like the same stories, but they add way more intense details?
Oh, yeah.
Like almost like an allegory to teach you something when you're like 4. Like, you know, Uncle so-and-so, that's why you shouldn't do this. And then at 8, they tell you, and it's a little bit more information. Then 12. Then you go through puberty, and then they tell you something heavy. Then you get to college, and then they're like, yeah, so that one story, X,
completely
Y, Z.
different,
And you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad that you left out those details.
Yep.
About somebody in the family or something that happened.
Yeah.
But what I like about the stories, and I'm glad that's the relationship I like now with my parents being older, is first of all, you understand what makes an adult an adult. Like, why when you're a kid, why does every adult look so mad? Why are they yelling? it's like, oh, because people die and people get divorced.
Life is hard.
Life is really hard,
Yeah.
and you had no idea. Kind of full circle with what you said about what your mom told you about, like if someone's being mean or rude, you don't know what they're going through. So like, treat them with respect, like you want. And if you don't like them as an individual, that's fine. You don't have to be with them. You don't have to live with them. You don't even have to socialize with them. But I forgot where I was going. Oh yeah, so don't have to socialize with them. And the stories they tell you, and it seems like your mom told you those stories, very wise information she gave you, and you took it to heart. It's good. And I had the same thing told to me. We have very similar personalities based on what you've been telling me, which is fun. But my mom and dad said the same kind of thing to me. Growing up Christian, I'm sure your parents may have been a little Christian too, based on that information they gave you.
Yeah, Catholic.
Catholic. So, yeah, I mean, that's one of the best things about religion is that kind of beautiful human tone they give you about forgiveness, patience, not being rude to people even if they are rude to you, things like that. That's the one thing I'll say about religion that is good. We don't have to talk about the other parts. But have you noticed with that mindset, because I've noticed it, that I use that and I apply it to stuff, but it ends up upsetting people sometimes when I'm like, what are you upset about? I give off the stats. We are the wealthiest. We have this. We have that. You can talk to me in multiple languages. You can text me it. You could take this is amazing. What are you upset about? Yeah, it doesn't go well when people are like, yeah, but it doesn't change the fact I'm still like hurt or sad or heartbroken or broke, whatever it is, you know?
Yeah.
And which is funny because it actually helps me when I'm facing those things. I'm like, I feel better when I think, like, you know what? Why am I upset? I'm in a car. I have a vehicle. I can drive around. I don't have to Uber. I don't have to take the bus. I don't have to take the train. I don't have to walk somewhere. All the things I do that are difficult, I have to elect to do. I have to decide I have to do it.
You can choose your own struggles.
I chose one today. I went out for a 6-mile hike. It was cold. It was windy. I was the only one out there doing it. But it's because for the rest of the day, I'm sitting in a climate-controlled basement talking to someone about whatever. I'm grading projects. I'm doing nothing. It's actually Friday, Thanksgiving break, so I'm not doing anything. And I have done the hard jobs. I have swung the hammer. I have cut stuff. I have done welding. I worked in a warehouse for 7 years. I did all of that. So when I see all those people doing it, I am always so grateful. Like, oh, I have to come out and electively choose to go run around in the world in the cold. If I don't do that, I could just sit on a couch all day on my laptop making
the privilege
money
of choice.
and getting fat. And just losing my health in my life. I have to decide to go be healthy now because my work and people like me in the white collar worlds, your future world, you don't have to do anything. It's not a physically demanding career job. So you'll find yourself getting very unhealthy if you get those jobs. So you have to go out and electively struggle. I have to decide to struggle every day for exercise. Otherwise, I won't do anything. I don't have to leave my house, which is, it's a great thing. But so what I'm getting at is I have to deliberately make myself suffer. And otherwise, I won't feel much physical suffering. And then on the mental part of it, I'm not a genius, but I'm not stupid. So I deliberately have these conversations. This podcast is to help me get better at speaking, better understand people, different perspectives. I try to read books or things I normally never would have to get better at it because I have such a difficult time reading and pronouncing words. And funny enough, it's not really funny. It's kind of sad a lot of kids deal with this, but you brought this up earlier. Your school you went to, they didn't have the resources for certain students. And then you went to a better high school that did. And like now a better school like Harvard that has even more. But at the schools that don't have much, like your elementary school, just like mine, I went to a doctor and they went to a therapist when I was a kid, and they did all these tests on me. It was at University of Chicago, and because I had a bunch of surgeries when I was a kid, so that's why they were constantly doing tests on me. And they discovered like, oh, he is great with all these things. He just struggles a lot with reading and comprehension. His language skills are not that great. So my mom took that letter, an official letter from a doctor, a scientist, for University of Chicago, brought it to the principal of my school, and the principal said, yeah, but there's worse kids, so we can't get him in. Like, he's not going to get tutoring. He's not going to go into a special class for that because there's actually worse kids. Because my other tests were really good. My IQ was good. It just wasn't good in this thing. And they're like, sucks to suck.
Wow.
And forever I've been struggling. I never got the help.
Yeah.
I'm aware of it now. So I deliberately have a podcast and read books. The two things I struggle with. I throw myself into there because I failed so bad at it that my friends, peers online, I'd make a post and have 17 spelling and grammar errors, and everyone would make fun of me and would call it out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I know how to not have that happen anymore. Post more, write more emails,
Do what's
read more.
hard.
It was hard, and I got way better. Now I make mistakes, but it's so rare. It's so rare, and I even catch them like, oh, that's not how you do it. And it's gotten to the point now where peers have asked me like, hey, how should I word this email or write this post? And I'm like, oh my God. It only took 10 years of struggling on a public forum in front of the internet before I really got better at it and good at it. But it was kind of like what you're saying, the failing. There's nothing more embarrassing than when you can't get your own language right that you grew up and were educated on, that the whole country speaks, and you're supposed to be an educator and supposed to be successful, and you botch that. It's pretty embarrassing. But you learn. First of all, you stop getting embarrassed each time you do make the mistake. You learn from it, you get better. And the most important thing is you learn not to point that out in other people when they make the mistakes. In fact, you help them. Hey, I noticed, like I have students that sometimes send the worst emails ever sent ever. And I will tell them, not through the email, because it can come off as condescending. They can't see your tone in your eyes. Tell them in person. And I always tell it to any friend, anyone ever. If you really have a critique or you're trying to help out someone you care about or love, don't do it online. Don't do it through email. Shoot. Don't do it through text message. Don't even do it over the phone. Do it to their face so they can see that you're not being condescending. You're not trying to call them out. You do care. You want them to be successful. So now you're going to be like, hey, listen, Bob, I know you love, making videos and posts and stuff. You're a content creator, but I have noticed you do have some spelling errors. I'm not making fun of you. I just want to let you know maybe I could help you get a little bit better at that so you can be better at your job. And even bring up examples like, hey, I'm not good at this. So see how I'm not good at that, but I'm trying? You can do that here.
Yeah.
And that's such a healthier way. You can grow so much better as an individual and your community, your friends, and then it has a snowball effect. Society sees that. People who have important jobs see it. Now they try to implement it,
Yeah.
It can go a long way, but I think also what you brought up a couple hours ago when you were in elementary school, you said we were talking about the issues with like money, teachers, funding from the government, but it does start at the home, the family. Like what your mom told you changed her whole life, that mentality. I'm sure your dad said similar things, and that changed everything for you. Regardless of what school you went to, you still would have been thinking that way. Like it would have been how you applied everything, regardless of any fancy school or not fancy school.
Yeah.
So yeah, it starts at the home. It starts with mom and dad or whoever's around to give you examples to live and lead by example.
Yeah.
And when you don't have that, if your mom's just like on her phone the whole night and your dad's not around or he's on his phone, like of course you're gonna be on your phone in class. You don't even know it's not right. You don't even know it's rude.
It's just normal.
It's just normal.
Yeah.
It can't be that rude if mom and dad do it.
Yeah.
And
that's a hard thing for a kid to learn is like when you're young, you idolize your parents. They can do no harm to you or the world. Like they're perfect and they're trying their best. And then you realize when you get older and you realize, oh, my parents could be wrong about this or they were wrong about this or I don't want to be like my parents. I think that's also like a scary thing for a child to choose is like, where do I want to deviate from like the values and the example that my parents gave me and where am I becoming my own person? And that's really hard and that's a lot to ask from a kid. And I feel like a lot of the kids that I went to elementary school and maybe a lot of the kids that you teach, from what it sounds like, maybe have to grow up really, really fast. And I remember, like, my mom, all of this that I said about the lessons about this is how your cousin is living and this is how I live. My mom was telling me this at age, like, 8. She was like, yeah, my dad died when I was 3. And, like, your cousins don't have running water. And, like, your dad had, like, 2 pairs of shoes. Like, I would cry. I would cry when I was young and be like, really? He didn't have shoes? Like, I feel horrible. And I think that's also a thing that a lot of low-income kids have to navigate, especially those that, quote-unquote, make it out. I don't like the term, but that's what people use, like make it out or get to like more selective institutions is like that survivor's guilt of like my parents didn't have the luxury, the privilege of choosing where to go to school, of having a free education, and I get to do that. And my parents they still have needs at home, like the mortgage, they're struggling to pay the mortgage, or my dad got into a car crash, like things like that. Like I'm here studying like art and psychology at Harvard. Like, should I go back home? Should I like take a gap year? These are things, and I've had friends who took gap years because their parents like just couldn't handle them going to college, but like family concerns came up or their health came up and you just can't control that. Yeah. So it's hard for a young kid, especially those who don't have like the most resources. And I think it's also for the parents, it's hard. Like I remember my mom and I, she's my best friend. Like we communicate all the time. If she's angry at me, she'll let me know. If I'm upset at her, I'll let her know. And like when I was like in middle school and like starting to grow up and starting to do my own thing, she was like, it's painful for me. This is why I'm like lashing out at you and like raising my voice at you and like putting my foot down and not letting you go out with friends or stay after school for a club, like, because I'm losing you. I'm losing my little girl, and it's hard. Like, you're my world. I came here because I didn't even know who you were, and I wanted to make a better life for you. And now you're leaving me, and I know that you're leaving me to start a better life and to be happy, but it hurts me. As a parent, it hurts me, and you're hurting me, and you don't mean to hurt me, but it is painful and it hurts me. So it's hard. It's hard for everyone. Life is just hard, man.
Life
It's hard
is
for
hard.
the kids. It's hard for the parents. It's hard for the teachers, and that's why I always say, like, with my art, with these shows, with anything that I do, is like you just have to have empathy. Like, you don't know where people are coming from. You don't know the lessons they were taught as a kid, how their home life was like. And especially now that I'm learning about like psychology, and I especially like social psychology and developmental psychology, and so much of like the child's like first 3 years of their life and the first 7 years of their life, it really defines their personality, their habits, the way that they look at romantic relationships, platonic relationships, the way that they just conduct themselves in the world. Like so much of that is formed and crystallized like when they're young, and it's so hard to break those habits later in life. So
Yeah.
it's and the thing is, nobody teaches you. That's what my mom would say later when we had like harder conversations of, why didn't you do this? Why did you do that? Why did whatever? She was like, nobody teaches you how to be a good parent. Like, it's kind of trial and error. And now I know, okay, yeah, there's books, yeah, there's podcasts, yeah, there are YouTube videos, but like my mom is 60. Like,
Different time.
different times. You can't expect that of them. Like, she got to the US like barely a few years before I was born. Like, didn't have a house, didn't have family, didn't have a car, didn't have a job, didn't have a degree, didn't know anybody. Like,
Nothing.
you can't expect that from other people. And I think you mentioned before, like, how do you, like, have you run with this frame of mind of like, you make what you can out of life, and like what I just said, like, have you run into like conflicts where people, like when you give advice to people that they don't take it the right way? It was kind of like the framing
Yeah.
of your question. I think I like to listen to this podcast called like The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday.
I know that
And
podcast.
It's a really good podcast.
Yeah.
And he, like, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius
Yes.
is like just the Stoic philosophy. I love to read that, and I love to like implement that in my own life. And one of the lessons of like the great Stoics from Marcus Aurelius is that he says like something along the lines of like, I hold these high expectations for myself of like, make all of what I just said, all these high expectations I hold for myself, but I can never apply them to other people. You can't apply them to your family. You can't apply them to your friends, or else you're going to live a pretty sad life. Like, if you say like, why can't they be grateful that we live in the best economy, society in the world, and like I have a phone and running water in a car, and yeah, but not everybody sees it that way, unfortunately. Although maybe you think I think their life would be easier if they were more grateful, or if they could think about their life in the context of like the world and the universe and other developing countries, and they might be more happy and more grateful. You can't force feelings on someone. You can't force someone to understand something. You can give them your own opinion, but I tend to not do it, just because even when I've talked to some other friends who are studying psychology and like have even brought it up in my classes of like, this is how the rest of the world is. The US is really privileged, and like we're privileged at Harvard. Like, you get some weird looks, and it's kind of a hard thing for people to like process, because even though you don't mean for it to come across that way, or I don't mean for it to come across that way, you kind of, there's like a little bit of implied, like, not guilt, but a little bit like, oh, so you're saying I'm privileged and I have to be grateful, and I just asking people to think of the world in a certain way is always hard, whether it's religion or philosophy or whatever it may be. You can't change the way that somebody feels about their own life. So what I've always thought about myself, and I think it has alleviated a lot of conflict in my life, is like, I can hold these opinions and these standards for myself, but the second that I try to apply it to my mom or my friend or whoever, people don't like being told what to
No.
do. They don't like being told. You can say,
Not
this is what
at
I do,
all. At
and this
any
is what I
age.
do, but yeah, at any age, truly.
Nobody.
Let them live their life, and you can live yours, and it's hard, because if you think that you have the solution to their problems, you want to share it with people, but sometimes people don't like, or not sometimes, people never like to be told that they're wrong or what to do. Never. They
Even
don't.
if it was nice, even if it's by someone they know, it doesn't matter.
Nope.
And it's the Stoicism. I didn't realize that's kind of the philosophy that I've kind of lived by. I didn't know it until older and learned about that term and the people in history that came up with it. And it is a great way to live. It's an impossible thing to tell anyone to do. You have to come up with that and be inspired by it on your own and your own decision. But to try to like bestow that upon people and tell them like, oh, you should try this and look at it from this perspective, it definitely does not work. It usually blows up in your face.
Yep.
And I am a very literal person, kind of a purist, not an elitist, a purist. I like the best version of things. I like craftsmanship. I like people being what they are. So not really into plastic surgery. I am into real plastic surgery, like you got in a car accident, your face is deformed. I've had legit plastic surgery. It's a life changer, but not into the kind you think I'm talking about. I don't care for makeup. I don't care for any of these things that distort what the pure thing of what it really is. I also think it's got a lot of social issues, but that's another thing. And yeah, so trying to tell people like, oh, you should try to go on walks more and read more and try to educate yourself, meditate, fasting, eat healthier,
work out, less screen time,
people, talk to different people, have people
they'll
from different cultures.
Down immediately
shuts down. Well, what I gotta do that? Why don't you do this? You should try that. Doesn't work well. And then when you really do have an answer, you are correct and you can give a good answer. To try to tell someone like, hey, you should try this, that also doesn't work. So to me, the best way to learn about doing it is you have to start off these conversations with, well, how I feel about this or what worked best for me or my opinion on this. Be clear that it's just what worked for you or an opinion. I tried this, and that. Maybe you should try that. Like that's probably the best you can do. But trying to tell someone like, oh, what you really need to do is this and that is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
And then another thing you said about the guilt at like a prestigious university like that. I always tell people I meet in life, which is, it's gone up more and more as I got older, that are very successful or wealthy or come from like a wealthy family or a good school. I'm saying there's nothing wrong with being wealthy or coming from a good school, being smart with a high IQ, being born with a high IQ. There's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong is what you do with it. It's what you end up doing with that is where it becomes wrong. If you know that you have a great IQ, that you came from nowhere and you still were able to get to great places because you were just born with such high intelligence and you can test really well and take standardized tests really well, that's fine. I'm not mad at you, but what are you doing with that? Are you wasting? Are you becoming another stat on someone who just went to a really great place, made a lot of money and wasted and didn't do anything productive with it, didn't change anything? That's where I have a problem with it. So I would tell the students, your contemporaries, your colleagues, like, well, first of all, everyone has. If you're listening to this podcast, you have a privilege. You have access to the internet and technology. You can understand English. This is a privilege. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means relative. The word privilege has been hijacked. It just means that relative to time and space, you just are in a better position to live and not die by a horrible disease or by a horrible warlord. Like that's pretty much it. But you still can die from other stuff if you get too privileged, like obesity and a bunch of cancer. So it's not really a problem that people are at those schools. It's what they do with it. And kind of like what I was saying, again, like 2 hours ago, I wish more people who went through those schools that do get the most important jobs in the world did something more with the information they learned at the schools about the problems with the most important people in the world that have the jobs and the degrees that they have before they even get there. That's the issue. It's like the snake eating itself, It's just like a perpetual problem. No. But yeah, I have no problem with anyone who has money or went to a good school or is very smart. I admire those people. I find them very fascinating. I just wish they did more with it, Yeah. They have the ability. They have the connections. They have listeners. They have followers. They have millions of subscribers. I just wish they did more with it. And I need to check out that podcast more because I'm aware of that podcast and that is he a writer? What's
Ryan Holiday?
Yeah,
I think when you Google him, it comes up as like modern philosopher.
Yeah, he's like a philosopher.
He's a writer.
I
call him a writer.
I figured he was a writer
because he has his own like philosophy, but it's mostly like reiterating the Stoic one. So I consider him like a writer and an entertainer because he does a lot of like shows and podcasts and other things like that. Mm-hmm. But he's a great resource for sure because he just, I think, try to tell like a teen or an older adult to like sit down and read like some Stoic philosophers' readings from like
1,000 years ago.
Yeah, they're not going to do it. But he really just makes it, he takes like little snippets and quotes and he just, sometimes his videos also have like visuals and stuff. I think I always recommend it to all of my friends, especially those that are, dealing with something difficult or like a hard time in your life. I think it's just an amazing resource. Yeah. It's a really good resource. And it's like, he has like longer podcasts, but I think the Daily Stoic is like a 10-minute bite of like philosophy.
I know that one.
Every day. Mm-hmm. So that one is like super easy.
I
listen to it in the morning. Maybe.
You're good at this.
Maybe in the morning. Maybe someday.
You are articulate. clear, good memory, good recall. Have a lot to say, a lot of experience, cool subject matters. Well,
Maybe
I could see
one day.
an art one. I could see that. An
That'd
econ
be
one.
cool. I'd have to get a mic though and a camera.
I could tell you where to get them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell everybody where they could find. I wanted to talk a little about your art because we didn't even touch much on your art, which
Yeah.
is a really big thing you do. Tell everyone the type of mediums you work in, maybe some history behind it, what got you started, things like that.
Yeah. So when I first started, I think like most kids, you have like your coloring books, your crayons, your whatever. Since I was a kid, I was always like doodling, drawing on napkins, on tables, on walls, literally anything that I could get my hands on. I always just like to create. But I think where it really started for me was like in middle school. I don't even know how, but I had like just graphite, just a mechanical pencil, and I would start to sketch like eyes. I don't know if I had to guess, it would probably be something I saw on YouTube or Pinterest or something online that inspired me. But I started to sketch eyes. And then I would doodle eyes like in my notebooks. And then I think just the feedback that I got from my family and friends of like, this is really, really realistic. Like I wish I brought photos with me, but like I was like 11, 12 years old and I could draw a pretty good hyper-realistic eye. Like I thought it was pretty good. I thought it looked like a photo almost. I liked it. And so I would just draw like eyes and eyes and eyes and nose and lips and just a lot of like facial features with like YouTube videos that I found online. And it didn't take much, just paper and like a mechanical pencil. And then as I watched like more YouTube videos, I was like, okay, maybe I should get a charcoal set. I don't know what charcoal is, but I'll get charcoal. I'll get blenders and a blending stump. And they're not super expensive, luckily. Like it's like $20 you can get started with a decent notebook and some pencils. And I did that for like 7th and 8th grade. And then when I got into Northside, I mentioned like the art cubed, like the advanced art class where it's like 12 kids and like all the 3 teachers, like, and they just go through everything like sculpture. They go through like sculpture, bookbinding, painting. They go through like a bunch of mediums. But for you to get into that class, you had to submit a portfolio. And I was like 12, 13, and I was like, what is a portfolio? Like, how do I make a portfolio? And again, through YouTube and the internet, which is, I think, throughout everything, like any major thing that I've accomplished, it's been through YouTube and the internet. Like it's such a huge resource. Like
for your
truly,
generation, I mean.
it's huge.
Yeah.
You can learn how to do so much.
It blows
so
my
much.
mind when students and people your age are just like, how do I do this? I'm like, you have the internet.
Yeah.
Just Google it. Like, you can learn how to do anything.
Anything,
Like,
yeah.
everything and anything. Like, we didn't have Google when I was a kid, and you winged it. You learned through trial and error and failing. Okay, how do I do that? But now you could just look it up. Anything. Like,
Or anyone, too.
anyone, anything. You can get in contact with people you normally just never could
Across the world. No, it's insane.
The world. It's amazing.
Insane.
So,
Yeah,
your generation growing up with it, I mean, if you don't have access to stuff and you don't have that much money, you could just YouTube, Google.
No,
YouTube.
literally, that's I think how I've accomplished every major thing in my life has
That's
been through
insane.
Google, and it's free for
Yeah.
everyone. It's insane. But I started like getting my portfolio ready through like YouTube, and I'd love to draw like hyper realistic stuff. So I had like a face and a lips and whatever it was. I submitted the portfolio, got in, and even before that, I think I was in 7th grade or 6th grade. I was 11, so I think I was 6th grade. Like, our music teacher had like a ukuleles. Like, I don't know if you remember the ukulele craze that happened in like, this must have been like, I don't even know, 2016, 2015. Like, everybody and their mom had like a ukulele.
I did. I got
huge.
one in 2012, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, it
around
was a
that time.
thing.
Yeah.
It was a thing. And she like taught us how to play the ukulele. And I remember I like was getting it really, really quickly. And she was like, Katherrin, you should get a ukulele. Like, you're really, really good. And you like to sing, like, get a ukulele. And we went to Guitar Center and it was like $25 or whatever it was. Like, it was like the cheapest, like little like
Was it, like,
wooden
green?
ukulele. It was a soprano. No, luckily it was
No.
made out of wood,
Okay.
thankfully. Not one of those like plastic
Yeah.
ones. But I bought a ukulele and I started playing that when I was like 11 through YouTube videos. Like, I still don't know how to read sheet music, but I looked up like all the like YouTube ukulele instructors, music instructors. I would go and just like follow along and write the tabs on my like paper. And I would have like a music notebook with all of the songs that I knew and all of the chords and all of the tabs. And like, I learned how to finger pick when I was like 11 to 12. And then when I was 13, my mom was like, you want to try a guitar? Or I don't know. I told her I wanted a guitar and she was like, yeah, we'll get you a guitar. And she got it at like a thrift store or something. And it was like a huge guitar. It was like for a grown ass man. It was like ginormous. And I was like 13. I literally could not play. I struggled to play that for like a summer. And then I was like, I need a smaller guitar. This can't work. And I Googled like, what brand guitar should I get? What material? And I got a Spanish like nylon string guitar that is like way smaller for me. And I started playing guitar when I was 13, all through YouTube videos, because music classes are super expensive.
Yeah.
Or it was expensive. And then I started Northside, and I got into the advanced art class, and we did like a little bit of like ceramics, like slab building and like little sculptures. We did bookbinding. And in that class, we would have what's called like a 20-hour project. And that's where every semester you would have to choose a project of whatever medium, whatever theme you wanted, submit a proposal. And then if it was approved, then you would have like 3 or 4 checkups with a 20-hour project. And by the end of the semester, you had to have the project, as the name would imply, 20 hours spent on it. And then everybody who was in an advanced art class would share and have like a really big exhibition. The whole school was invited to just go and like see the work that students made. So I was like 14 and I had my first 20-hour project, and then I had another 20-hour project. And then my following year, I was like in advanced art and advanced drawing and painting class. And I took, over my time in high school, I took 2 advanced drawing and painting classes and then 1 intro to ceramics class. And then I think that really helped me. Just like receiving constant feedback, seeing my work exhibited, I think just really like kept me motivated. And obviously the feedback from like my teachers and my parents and my peers of like, you're really, really good at this. And like, what do you mean you've never taken private lessons? And what do you mean you're using like $10 like materials? Like, this is insane. Like, continue. I think just that positive feedback really, really helped me. And then I mentioned before, I started like after school matters, like taking classes during COVID. So summer after sophomore year. And then that was like an advanced drawing and painting class. And that one, you had to apply with a portfolio. Luckily, I had like some more work and I got in. And then I remember during COVID, they would send us like these giant, like humongous like bags filled with Blick supplies, like all of the acrylic paint, all of the pens, like any, like a art kid's like dream. And it was all for free. Like all of it was for free. Like 8 notebooks, like an insane amount of art supplies for every single kid. And the instructor would hand deliver it to every single kid's house. So that's why I say like Miriam, like I love her so much. She really like inspired everyone in that class. And the vast majority of the kids in that class either went to like Parsons, RISD, or Columbia in Chicago. Like a lot of them continued to do art like now and after. And I think she was a huge part of that. Like she was like this lovely old woman who, I think she retired now. She retired like my senior year was her last year teaching, or I think she had 1 more semester after that. But she, was an art educator her entire life, was a painter and a drawer her entire life. And then she just retired with her husband. But yeah, she was incredible and she really motivated me.
That's the beauty of good educators, the right kind of educator. They could change kids' lives forever. Many kids, hundreds, thousands. Most teachers interact with thousands of kids, and you could change it. And it's amazing when you see the change, when you get the email a year or 2 later and like, hey, I decided to do this. Yeah. It makes it worth it, It really does. So you do a lot of creative stuff, and your drawings, your work is beautiful. It's really good. I remember seeing it on your Instagram. I was like, whoa, this is impressive. I like it. So have you been selling it? Do you mostly just do exhibitions and try to sell it there? Do you do like freelance, sell through Instagram, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So in high school, I don't know if it was just like the extra time that I had because of COVID, but I started selling like paintings and drawings to like my friends. Was charging like so dirt cheap for it. Like truly, I think back and I'm like, why did you? It would be like an 8-hour painting and I'm like, yeah, $50 sounds good. Like below minimum wage sounds excellent. But I think when you love what you do, like you would be doing it for free.
Right.
Like,
you don't even know how to price it either.
No, no one teaches you.
It's a foreign world, pricing art. That's it. It's almost impossible. A little fake, a lot of money laundering, depending on what level you're at. Yeah, it's a strange thing to price something you made. It just is,
Especially when you're like, I started selling my work when I was like sophomore in high school, so probably 16.
Wow.
No, 15, 16. Like, I don't know what I was doing. And I had no authority. Like, why would you pay like over $100 to a kid who has less education than you? Like, that's kind of ridiculous. So I just had no authority to do it. But yeah, I started doing like acrylic, watercolor, oils, mostly through that program. Like through After School Matters, I got exposed to all of these different materials that I otherwise like wouldn't have known. And I'm trying to think. Yeah, and then senior year, I started to really get into like ceramics and sculptures. And I remember my art teacher, because I hadn't sculpted since like my freshman year in that like art cube, like the advanced art class. And then I was making a portfolio to submit to colleges. So my senior year, I was like an art making machine. Like I was literally, I remember most of the regular decision, like college applications are due on December 1st or January 1st, sorry. And January 1st, I was finishing like 2 paintings up. Like I was truly like going against the time, like really trying to get it in. But part of like my portfolio that I submitted to colleges was like the series of hand sculptures called Erkinson's Theory. And he was a sociologist, and it's like developmental stages of a child's life and like the conflicts in each one. And I made 5 of them. And if you can imagine 5 hands, that's a lot of material, a lot of things to do within like the 2 months or 3 months that I had to like make it. And my art teacher, who's like reviewing me and giving me feedback on like the descriptions of the portfolio and just like how I wanted to compose it at the end, she was like, what do you mean you haven't touched clay since like your freshman year? Like these are really, really good. And I think just in conclusion, like the positive reinforcement and like the positive feedback from my teachers and my friends and family, I think really just made the difference. Because otherwise I would have probably done like full on econ, Goldman Sachs, like, but then I probably wouldn't have gone into Harvard, because I think a huge part of like applying to college is telling a story, having a passion. And for me, that passion was art. That's what I really like honed in on in my essays. And like I said, it's a strategy, right? You can't just kind of like write about your entire life in a scattered way. Like it really has to be kind of linear and chronological and intentional. And a big part of how I applied to scholarships and colleges were like talking about art and my culture and painting and drawing. And again, all of that wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for those like teachers who cared about me and saw something in me and encouraged me.
Yeah.
So that's a huge part of
Yeah.
where I am and what I got to and my passion for art. Because truly, if they hadn't encouraged me, I probably wouldn't have pursued it at all.
Have you reached out to any of them? Do they know about what you've been doing? And
no, it's so bad. It's so bad.
I mean, it's not. You're young enough to where not enough time has gone by. I mean, some of these teachers are only from like 2 to 4 years ago. It's not that long.
I mean, my middle school, I've gone back like twice. I usually go back during the summer, and then sometimes during winter break, I'll go back to my elementary school. It's like those. I say hi to all of them because the majority of the teachers that taught me are still there. And I say like, especially those like reading and writing teachers, I'm like, thank you so much for like Harry Potter was like my shit when I was like in elementary and middle school, and I would literally devour those books like in like 3 days. I would destroy like 300 words. Like I loved Harry Potter so much.
Yeah.
And I think
Those
that really
are thick books.
Yeah, those are really big books. But I started reading them. I was like in 6th grade. My 6th grade teacher, she like got us into Harry Potter, and I like finished the entire series by the end of the school year. Like all of the books by the end of the school year. I like love them. So I go back and I like say hi to them and see what they're doing. And I don't think I've ever. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I've ever like gone back and said like specifically, Miss O, like you changed my life with those Harry Potter books. I don't think I've ever like
It'll happen
been that
eventually.
direct.
Or send a letter, or
I
even
think,
an email. You know.
I think I would.
Yeah.
But I go back to see my elementary school teachers like every year, and then my high school I have not gone back to. I think it's just far.
Yeah.
It's far, and I also don't stay in Chicago for too long. Like I come home for
Right.
Thanksgiving, and our break is from Wednesday to Sunday. We don't have the whole
Oh,
week
you didn't
off.
get the whole week.
So I like stay at home with my family like the
And then
entire
you're out
time.
Sunday. Well, thanks for making the time to do this.
No, thank you so much.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't,
No,
man,
thanks.
I appreciate it because you have such little time here with family, and
Yeah.
you go back, and then, so you're going to be graduating in May 2026? Double major?
Yeah, if
That's
all
really
goes
cool.
well.
I'm sure it will. You seem very intelligent and hardworking, which is great to see people who are going into the arts and then marrying it with other sciences like economics or psychology. It's really great to see that because you can do so much with that. Not to put any pressure on you, but the whole world's fate is in your hands. No, it's good. It's important. You know, little boys need to see it. Little girls need to see it. You know, little girls need to see it so they can be inspired to know they can do it too. Little boys need to see it so they know how to behave, knowing that other women can do stuff too. It's not just you. They're both important things to see when you're a kid. But keep doing what you're doing. It's remarkable. Tell everyone the name of where they can find your art, and then the 501c3 business you're doing with art galleries. Just anything you're doing. Tell the people listening where they can find it, learn about it.
Yeah, well, just thank you so much for having me on, and what you work with, whether it's a festival or recording with artists or having this podcast. It's insane. You're doing so much. I don't know how you juggle it all, and you have your own family. I can't imagine. That's a lot.
It's busy. There's 17 hours in my waking day. I try to sleep 7. So I have 17 hours to do things. That's the way I look at it, you know? And yeah, just knowing like you don't know what's going to happen. You don't have the promise of tomorrow. You can learn from yesterday, and you can exist in the moment. And that's all you really have. And I've had a lot of close calls with death, so I'm like, I don't,
Wow.
just life. I almost get hit by cars, car accidents,
Wow.
surgeries, falling out of trees, you name it. So when you get really close touching death a lot, you're like, you know what? There's not much time. This is a very small speck in space and time that we have. No matter who you are, how old you are, what you look like, it doesn't matter. So do the best you can with what you have. Appreciate it. Be nice. Be a mentor. Inspire other people. Get inspired. Be kind. You don't know what someone else is going through, what they've been through, what they will go through.
Yeah.
And you don't know when it's going to happen to you. So be nice, because you might hit a wall. You might need love. You might need friends. You might need support one day.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
For sure.
But where can everyone find your work?
Yeah, thanks. So my website is KatherinnBillordo.com. Katherrin and Billordo are spelled, it's Katherrr, 2 R's, IN, Billordo, BILLORDO.com. That's my website. And then my art account is much simpler. It's just Katherrin.art, Katherrin, KATHERRIN.art.
Yeah, your name did. I was trying to figure out your name. I was like, we'll find out. She'll tell us.
Yeah, two R's.
Yeah, I kept trying to type it in. I was like, why is this 2 R's? Huh?
Yeah, sometimes people do a C and then an E at the end and then 1 R and a Y, and I'm like, nope, just two R's.
It usually
Just two
depends
Rs.
on the background, the ethnicity, the language you're coming from. Because I've
Yeah.
met Polish Kathys, Katarzynas. It's a very different kind of Kathy, Katherrin. And Hispanic people have different ways of spelling stuff. If you're German, it's different ways. If you're Jewish, like there's all,
Yeah, my mom, she wanted people, nobody says this now, she doesn't even say it herself, but at the time she was like, oh, I wanted people to say Katherrin, rolling the R's. And I'm like,
R. Mom,
nowhere.
we're in America, Mom. No one's even going to know.
She doesn't even say it. Like at home, it's Kati. It's Kati. So I'm like, you just made my name complicated for no reason for the rest of my life. But people remember it when they see it. They're like, oh, you're the only one with 2 R's.
It sticks out. I thought it was some, I was like, what? Is this a stage name? Like, what?
I wish.
No, it's unique. It sticks out. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one's saying the double R.
No one.
No, they're not.
Not even my own family. So I'm like, Katherrin is good or Kati is fine. So either works.
Wonderful.
Yeah. But thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for making art, for trying to do what you can with it, for going to a great school, and I know you're going to do something good with it. You're going to grow, whether it be graduate school or the not-for-profit. You seem like you have a great head on your shoulders. Kudos to your parents. And yeah, just keep inspiring people. You could see you being a great influence in what you do in your field. So I'm glad to have met you. I'm glad people like you exist, especially at your age. The internet's a weird thing. We could talk about that forever, what it's been doing to people, especially the earlier, the younger generation like yourself. They just grew up with it 100%. So I'm glad that you're here on this planet doing what you do. And I can't wait to see the cool things you keep doing. Yeah, and if you're in Chicago, I know you're in Boston right now, but when you come back, if you ever need help with the gallery, extension cords, speakers, lights, connections, people, volunteers, interns, all the students I work, I could just point them towards your direction.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And again, thank you for the amazing work you do and the great conversation we had. So
yeah, it was a pleasure. It's like 2 hours and 12 minutes.
Oh, wow. I lost track of time completely.
Yeah, it happens.
Whoa. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much again.
It was a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Ciao.